Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into the thick, mosquito-whining jungles of Vietnam. It's 1966, and you're not alone. Your M16 rattles gently against your chest as you shuffle through the muck. But there's something else, just ahead, just to the side, always alert. A low form moving beside you, panting in the humidity. You can't see more than 10 feet ahead through the vines and steam, but he knows something's out there. His hackles go up. His ears twitch, and then silence, like a warning held between heartbeats. You're not just a soldier tonight. You're part of a team, man and dog. And in this war, that might be the only thing that keeps you alive. You probably won't survive this, by the way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, pull the blankets closer, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air smells like gun oil, mildew, and the unmistakable stink of sweat-soaked fatigue uniforms. You're somewhere in the Central Highlands, near Pleiku maybe, where the red clay sticks to your boots like bloodied frosting. It's morning, but you wouldn't know. The sky's hidden under a ceiling of gray haze, and the horizon melts into the dense green crush of jungle. You hear it first, the distant thump-thump-thump of rotor blades, getting closer. Your hand goes instinctively to your helmet. The dust kicks up as a UH. One Huey punches through the treetops, wobbling and low. It hovers above the field like a wasp, and then the barking starts. Not loud, not panicked, just sharp and precise. A pair of German shepherds disembark with their handlers, calm but alert, like they know the terrain better than you do. One dog sniffs the air, then the ground. He's not looking around. He's reading it, analyzing the wind and the soil for what the human eye misses. You watch them join the perimeter sweep, tails down, noses leading. Nobody talks much. They don't have to. Let's rewind a second. These dogs, these four-legged soldiers, weren't just mascots or morale boosters. They were trained to detect tripwires, buried explosives, camouflage snipers, and hidden tunnel entrances. Some were attack dogs. Others were trackers. Some even parachuted into combat zones. And there weren't just a few of them. Over 4,000 dogs served in Vietnam during the war. Most were German shepherds, though you'd also see Belgian Malinois, Labrador retrievers, and a few Doberman pinschers. Many were volunteers, in a way, turned in by American families during military collection drives, promised a hero's return. Most never came back. Historians still argue whether this canine contribution truly shifted the course of the war. But there's little debate that they saved thousands of American lives. Here's a fringe tidbit you probably never heard. Some soldiers swore that the dogs could detect enemy emotions, fear, adrenaline, even intent, before a shot was ever fired. One handler claimed his dog refused to cross a bamboo footbridge. Minutes later, a squad walked across, and the bridge collapsed under a planted explosive. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe their noses just worked overtime. And it wasn't just smell. Scout dogs were trained for silence. If a dog froze in place, muscles locked, hackles raised, you stopped. Period. Didn't matter how confident you felt. That freeze could mean a sniper up ahead, or a tripwire stretched across a tree trunk, ready to tear you apart. You quickly learned to trust the freeze. Here's something most war documentaries skip. The dogs were never allowed to lead a patrol. That was a human rule. The handler walked ahead, leash taut, dog just behind or at the heel. Why? If the enemy was watching, a lead dog might draw fire, or worse, bait a trap. The human took that first step always, but the dog decided where that step went. And sometimes the dog didn't move at all. You remember one time, maybe 1968, near Khe Sanh. You were moving through elephant grass as tall as your neck. The dog, his name was Rex, lean and black-eyed, just stopped. Didn't growl, didn't bark, just planted his feet and wouldn't budge. Your heart froze, your boots locked up, 3 feet ahead. A tripwire, almost invisible, strung between two rotted stakes, the kind that detonates a bouncing Betty mine. Rex just saved everyone's legs. Some handlers whispered that the dogs could see ghosts. Maybe it was half joke, half defense mechanism, because sometimes they'd refuse to enter a bunker no one had touched in days. And sure enough, inside, a booby trap wired to the door frame. Or worse, nothing at all, just a musty smell and old bullet holes. But still the dog wouldn't go. Makes you wonder. Let's not pretend this was a clean operation. These weren't police K9s sniffing out luggage in airports. These dogs worked in war. They were exposed to the same horrors as the soldiers. Firefights, ambushes, artillery blasts, and death. Some dogs were wounded. Some were killed. Some suffered psychological breakdowns. Yes, even dogs can get PTSD. You saw one once. His name was Boomer. Big Labrador. After his handler died from a sniper shot, Boomer refused to eat. Wouldn't move from the bunker where his handler's cot used to be. Just lay there for days. When another soldier tried to leash him, Boomer bit clean through his wrist. Boomer didn't go back out again. Want to know what's almost too cruel to say out loud? Some of the dogs came back changed. Not just tired or skittish, but unrecognizable. A few turned aggressive, unpredictable. One dog, Whiskey, had been on over 100 patrols. The moment he got near another helicopter, he freaked, foaming at the mouth, howling so loud it made people cry. They had to sedate him just to move him. That didn't earn him a medal. It earned him a new label, unfit for return. Remember that phrase. You notice a habit in all the handlers. They talk to their dogs like equals, not like pets, not like equipment. They use full names, not nicknames. They share food, water, even cigarettes. One guy cuts his MRE in half and gives his dog the corned beef hash. I wouldn't eat that, you mutter. The handler just grins. He'll eat worse in the jungle. He's not wrong. Some nights, when the heat is too thick to sleep and the insects are extra loud, you hear a dog whimpering in its sleep. It twitches, kicks, makes soft growling noises, like it's reliving something. Something bad. The handler rolls over, rubs its back, whispers, "It's okay. You're safe." But you both know it's not true. Nothing is safe here, especially not the dogs. You're out early again. The sun hasn't cracked the tree canopy yet, and the jungle's cool enough to fool you into thinking this might be a tolerable day. It won't be. The heat will start to thicken in your boots and behind your ears by mid-morning, and soon your shirt will be plastered to your back with sweat and grime. But for now, it's almost peaceful. Almost. Until the dog stops moving. He halts mid-step, doesn't bark, doesn't growl, just stiffens, front paw hovering, ears straight as antennae. You freeze, raising a fist to halt the man behind you. Eyes dart across the clearing, scanning for movement. Nothing, just branches, leaves, the wind pushing through like it knows more than you do. You kneel beside your partner. His name's Duke, and he's focused on a low mound of earth 10 feet ahead. Your breath catches. That's not a hill. That's a tunnel entrance. You mark it, radio it in, pull back. Later, when the engineers dig into the site, they find a Viet Song tunnel system that runs nearly a mile underground, complete with weapons caches, tripwires, and bamboo punji pits. Without Duke, you'd have walked right into it. Dogs in Vietnam weren't an afterthought. They were embedded in every kind of operation: jungle patrols, perimeter security, tunnel detection, enemy pursuit. They were part of the combat tracker teams, a deadly little unit built from a dog, a handler, a cover man, and a radio operator. Their mission? Follow blood trails and enemy-sent trails through the unforgiving terrain. Hunt down survivors, often right after a firefight. It sounds clinical, procedural, but it wasn't. The cover man's job was to shoot anything the dog spooked. That's not a game. That's a heartbeat-by-heartbeat nightmare. Here's a fact that seems ripped from a dark novel. These dogs were trained not to bark unless absolutely necessary. Most dogs didn't even growl. That's how refined their behavior had to be. The enemy was always listening. Sound gave away your position. So they trained the dogs to alert with posture, with motion, with body tension. A silent freeze might save 10 lives. A single bark might start a firefight. One time, your team follows a tracker dog named Apache. He's got a scar on his side, and a weird little tick where he twitches his ears twice before sitting. Nobody knows why. Apache tracks a wounded enemy fighter across a rice paddy and into a bamboo grove. Every step, he pauses, sniffs, moves, pauses, until finally he stops and crouches, eyes on a thicket of brush. Then Apache does something rare. He barks. Not loud, not frantic, just once. And that's all it takes. The brush explodes, literally. Claymore mine. The only reason you're not vapor is because Apache paused just short of the wire. Want a truly weird tidbit? Some dogs were trained to ride in boats during river patrols. Not stand still or sit, but scan like little living radars. They'd lean into the wind, nose twitching, and give alerts toward riverbanks. A few even learned to signal direction by shifting their bodies, like a pointer with a mission. More than once, a dog warned of a jungle ambush before the gunners even spotted movement in the trees. Historians still argue whether these programs were underused or underreported. But the handlers? They didn't need statistics. They had survival. Back at camp, the dogs aren't resting. You'd think they'd get a break, curl up in the shade, nap until night patrol. No, they're doing drills, obstacle courses, scent recognition, obedience. Their handlers train them daily, because out here, even a single moment of hesitation could mean disaster. You watch one young handler work with a Doberman named Roxy. Roxy's lean, fast, all sinew and fire. She bolts across a balance beam, pivots, and returns, all while maintaining eye contact. Afterward, the handler sits beside her, arms around her neck. They just sit like that for 10 minutes. You ask him, why not let her rest? He shrugs. Resting's for people who get to go home. That's the truth nobody talks about. These dogs weren't just soldiers. They were temporary soldiers. Their return ticket? Non-existent. The U.S. government classified them as equipment. Let that sink in. Not personnel. Not comrades. Not living beings with names and war records. Equipment. And when the war started winding down, the equipment stayed behind. You hear the rumors early. Dogs being left in country. Handlers begging for their partners to be sent home. Denied. Red tape. Logistics. Quarantine protocols. All excuses. Nobody wanted to deal with the cost or risk of repatriating military equipment. And worse, some dogs weren't just left behind. They were euthanized. Clean term. Bureaucratic. Sanitized. But to the handlers who spent years trusting these animals with their lives, it was betrayal of the worst kind. You remember Sergeant Malone. Big guy. Quiet. Handled a German shepherd named Gunner. They'd been together nearly 14 months. More time than some guys spent in country. When Malone rotated out, he asked to take Gunner with him. Not possible, came the reply. Malone threatened to desert. Got put under watch. Gunner stayed. The last time anyone saw him, Gunner was tied near the wire of the compound, head low, tail not wagging. Nobody talked about it after that. That story's not unique. Thousands of dogs were left in Vietnam when the war ended. Out of over 4,000 deployed, fewer than 200 made it back to the United States. Let me say that again. Less than 5% were returned. The rest, left behind, transferred to South Vietnamese forces. Or, quietly, behind the curtain, put down. There was one handler, you think his name was Tom, who tried to sneak his dog onto a cargo plane. Hid him in a crate marked medical supplies. Got caught at a Nong. The punishment? Dishonorable discharge threat. The crate was opened. The dog removed. They say Tom never forgave himself. Here's a haunting detail. Years later, veterans groups would campaign to honor these dogs. They pushed for memorials, medals, even just basic recognition. Some progress was made. Plaques, statues, documentaries. But for many handlers, it was too late. The guilt ran too deep. Some never adopted another dog. Some couldn't talk about Vietnam without crying. One man, asked if he had any regrets, simply replied, "Yeah, I left my partner behind." The bond between handler and dog wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't Hollywood sentiment. It was real. And in some cases, the only thing that kept a soldier from falling apart in a jungle full of ghosts. You learn to trust something that doesn't talk, doesn't argue, doesn't sleep when you sleep. And when that trust is broken by bureaucracy, it doesn't heal. You look down now, and Duke is pawing at a mound of earth. Carefully, slowly, you crouch beside him, brush away the leaves. A tunnel. Again. You mark it. Again. And you scratch behind Duke's ears, whispering, "Good boy." You know he understands, because his tail thumps once, just once, and then he moves on, nose low, eyes sharp, heart loyal. The sound of rain doesn't reach you the way it used to. It's not soothing anymore. Not after months in country. Not after too many patrols. Out here, rain isn't a lullaby. It's a signal. It drapes over the jungle like a dirty curtain, muffling sounds you need to hear. The hiss of movement. The snap of a twig. The faint exhale of a booby trap being triggered just out of sight. Your dog doesn't care about the rain, though. His name's Scout. Lab mix, wiry, black coat gone brown from dust. And he moves ahead of you like he's immune to all hesitation. Nose to the ground, tail stiff, always alert. You watch him like a shadow watches the flame. You don't take your eyes off him, because Scout is the reason you're not in pieces by now. Let's rewind a bit. When America started deploying dogs to Vietnam in significant numbers, they weren't thrown together. This wasn't a case of grab any mutt and hope for the best. No, these were carefully selected animals, often from civilian donations or military breeding programs. The military put out calls across the country for dogs that fit very specific profiles. Size mattered. Too small, and they couldn't patrol effectively. Too large, and they made too much noise in the underbrush. Temperament was everything. The ideal dog was bold but not reckless, obedient but not robotic, fearless without being aggressive to handlers. Some breeds worked better than others. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dobermans, and Labrador Retrievers were the most commonly chosen. And here's your quirky fact of the day. Some dogs washed out because they were too friendly. One Doberman named Clipper was shipped back because he wouldn't stop wagging his tail at enemy fighters. No joke. Once selected, the dogs went to training camps. The most famous was at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, still active today as a key military working dog training center. There, the dog were paired with handlers and put through rigorous schooling. These weren't basic tricks. No sit-roll-over fetch stuff. This was mine detection, ambush detection, scent trailing, scout duties, sentry posture, tunnel search protocols. They learned to distinguish between friendly and hostile scents. They could find booby traps hidden under leaves or buried under inches of soil. But here's where it gets tough. Not all dogs bonded with their handlers. That relationship had to be nurtured day after day, like any soldierly partnership. If a dog didn't trust the handler, the team failed. If the handler didn't trust the dog, same story. One handler described the relationship like this. It's not like owning a dog. It's like sharing a heartbeat. Once trained, the dogs were deployed, often without ceremony. Some arrived by helicopter, noses twitching, legs stiff from the flight. Others came by cargo ships, crated and drugged, then released into the heat like athletes shoved into an unfamiliar arena. For some handlers, the first meeting happened at a base already under tension. Picture this. A green recruit, barely out of training, handed the leash of a dog that already had 2 tours under its collar. The dog knows more about survival than the guy holding the rope. That power imbalance created tension, but also humility. Veterans quickly learned to trust their dog's instincts. If the dog froze, you froze. If the dog moved, you followed. That wasn't superstition. That was hard-earned survival logic. Historians still argue whether the dog program should have been expanded more aggressively during the early years of Vietnam. Some say the brass saw dogs as a niche tool. Effective, sure, but not worth heavy investment. Others point to internal reports urging expanded use, especially for tunnel work and ambush prevention. The reality? Bureaucracy slowed everything down. Dogs arrived in the field later than they should have, and never in the numbers some commanders begged for. One colonel wrote in his 1968 field report, "Give me 10 dogs for every 100 men, and I'll show you a unit that doesn't die stupid." The request went nowhere. Back to you. You're following Scout along a narrow jungle path, mud slick, full of mosquito fog and humidity, so thick you can feel it behind your eyes. Scout pauses at a thicket. His tail goes rigid. He doesn't bark. You stop. Everyone behind you stops. He circles once, sniffs, sits. You step forward carefully. Pull back the ferns. They are half buried in the mud. Is a tripwire, almost invisible, wired to a canister. Old Russian anti-personnel mine. Would have caught your second man clean in the face. You clip the wire. Mark the spot. Keep moving. Nobody says anything, but everyone pats Scout on the way past. He just pants, tongue out, eyes watchful. He's working. Let's talk about the psychological strain for both of you. Handlers didn't just walk a dog and go home. These dogs were companions, yes, but also extensions of the handler's nervous system. You were constantly alert, tuned to every twitch of the ears, every sniff. Sleep was lighter. Emotions were tighter. Because if your dog got spooked or injured or killed, it wasn't like losing a weapon. It was like losing a brother. Some handlers reported symptoms of PTSD after their dogs were killed. Not just the trauma of the loss, but the sensation that they'd failed their partner, failed their unit, failed themselves. And the dogs? They felt it too. There are documented cases of dogs refusing to eat after their handler died. Some turned aggressive. Some just laid down and stopped responding. Grief, plain and simple. There's a story you hear one night from a guy out at Annam. He had a dog named Blitz, a huge shepherd with a black streak across his eyes that made him look like a bandit. Blitz once dragged his handler 20 feet backward during a patrol. No command, no bark, just grabbed the webbing of the guy's flak vest and hauled. A minute later, a mortar round hit the spot where they'd been standing. Saved the entire team. That handler tried, years later, to get Blitz brought home. He wrote letters, filed petitions, got signatures, all denied. Equipment is not eligible for repatriation. Blitz stayed. No one knows what happened to him. And here's your fringe fact, one that almost never makes it into the textbooks. There were unofficial dogs in Vietnam too. Strays, mascots, jungle pups adopted by units and raised on MRE scraps and shoulder scratches. Some of them became pseudo-sentries. Some learned to follow patrols, even warn of danger, just by mimicking the trained dogs. One dog, named Lady, was never formally trained, but she followed one unit for 8 months, alerting them every time they neared enemy presence. She got a field promotion. She even got a uniform. She died in a firefight. The men buried her under a bamboo grove and carved her name into a C-ration lid nailed to a tree. Official or not, she mattered. You don't know if Scout's going to make it. Not because of anything that's happened. He's fine. But because you know what the endgame looks like. You've seen the paperwork. They don't come home. You don't even get to write the goodbyes. The dogs get reassigned, or left, or put down. And you're supposed to just forget the smell of his fur after a rainstorm, the weight of his head on your lap when you're trying to ride home, the way he curled up beside you during rocket attacks. You're supposed to pack up, rotate out, get on a plane, and never look back. But how do you leave a heartbeat behind? How do you say goodbye to someone who saved your life over and over without ever speaking a word? Scout looks up at you now. His eyes are muddy amber. His tail flicks. You scratch his ear. You're doing good. You whisper. And maybe, just maybe, he understands. You wake to jungle sounds that barely register anymore. The chirring of insects. The far-off shriek of some unknown bird. The soft, rhythmic panting of Scout at your side. And the distant thud-thud of artillery fire, echoing like someone dragging furniture across the sky. Another day begins in Vietnam, and you can already feel the tension coiled tight in your chest. You sit up slowly, brushing leeches from your sleeve. Scout rises with you, alert instantly. He stretches his legs and shakes the dew from his coat. You share breakfast, what little there is. He gets some beef jerky from your MRE, and you get the comfort of his quiet, loyal presence. Another patrol is on the docket today. Another chance to walk straight into something fatal. And as always, Scout will go first. This section is about the missions. The ones no one outside the war really talks about. You've heard of jungle patrols, of course. But these weren't just walks through the woods. These were methodical, nerve-wracking, edge-of-your-sanity marathons where every vine might be a tripwire and every patch of dirt grave. And at the front of every patrol, the dogs. They weren't optional. Handlers and dogs were embedded into platoons, especially in high-risk areas like the Iron Triangle, the Mekong Delta, or the jungles of Quang Ngai. If the terrain was thick and the intel suggested VC activity nearby, the dogs went first. Scout duty was the most dangerous assignment in the dog handler world. Your job wasn't just to walk and survive. It was to be the tripwire detector, the human radar, the early warning system. If you and your dog failed, everyone behind you paid the price. The dogs learned to stop and point when they detected tripwires or enemy scent. Some would freeze. Some would lie down. Some would sit. The handler had to know the signal instantly, with zero hesitation. Let's bring in your historical fact now. By 1969, the U.S. military had formally deployed more than 4,000 military working dogs to Southeast Asia. These dogs participated in over 10,000 patrols and are estimated to have saved over 10,000 lives. That number's probably low. There are plenty of unrecorded saves, because when a mine doesn't go off or an ambush doesn't spring, no one writes a report. You just keep walking. One commander in the Central Highlands said, "I'd trust one dog over 6 scouts. The dog doesn't blink, doesn't panic, doesn't miss breakfast." That's about right. Today's patrol is already going badly. Your boots squish in mud that smells like rotting bamboo and old diesel. You pass the same uprooted trees from yesterday, marked now by blood-dark moss where another squad had a firefight 2 days ago. You're moving uphill, always harder, and the sun is already oppressive. Jungle heat isn't like dry heat back home. It's like wearing a damp wool coat made of mildew and regret. Scout suddenly stops. He crouches, not sits, not lies down. Crouches low and growls softly, almost like he's whispering something only you can hear. Your hand tightens on the leash. You motion for the platoon to freeze. You scan the area. Nothing looks off. That's the danger of Vietnam. It's all camouflage. The trees, the traps, the enemy. All made to blend, to fade, to vanish. The VC were masters of terrain and stealth. If Scout is growling, something's here. You inch forward with him. 20 feet. 30. And then you see it. Just beyond a fallen log, half covered in palm fronds and red clay, is a bunker mouth. You almost stepped onto the roof. It's a tunnel complex entrance. Let's pause for a fringe fact. Vietnam's tunnel systems were so extensive that some of them had multiple levels, with living quarters, hospitals, ammo storage, and even classrooms buried beneath layers of earth. One system under Cu Chi stretched over 150 miles. You could, and some soldiers did, get lost down there for days. Tunnel rats, those poor souls sent into these mazes, would sometimes carry flashlights, pistols, and a dog. Not always officially, but when you're crawling into a nightmare, you bring anything that can smell something you can't. Some dogs refuse to enter tunnels. Too dangerous, too close, too uncertain. Others went in willingly, and often didn't come back. You report the tunnel mouth. The squad sets up perimeter. You and Scout back off, hearts hammering. The dog just saved you again. No fanfare, no medal, no pats on the back. But you know. Later that day, you learn from command that the tunnel was rigged. A false floor covered in punji sticks. A satchel charge near the entrance. Would have killed anyone who entered blind. You scratch Scout behind the ear that night, harder than usual. He looks up at you with that calm, wet-eyed stare that says, "I'll do it again tomorrow." Let's talk about the handlers for a second. They came from all walks of life. Farm boys from Kansas, tough kids from Detroit, quiet loners from small towns. Some volunteered for dog duty. Others were assigned. But they all learned the same thing. This job changed you. One handler, stationed near Da Nang, wrote in his journal, "After 6 months with Toby, I trust no one else. The dog has a sixth sense, and I've got a seventh now, the constant fear of losing him." Handlers were often given extra training in animal psychology, not just commands, but the emotional needs of the dogs. You had to keep your partner balanced, alert but not panicked, focused but not overworked. Dogs, like people, could burn out. Some went catatonic from stress. Others became too aggressive, snapping at handlers, barking at shadows. Scout hasn't reached that point yet, but you see it in his eyes sometimes, when the helicopters pass overhead, when mortars fall close. He flinches a little more, licks his lips, whines in his sleep. You don't sleep much either. Historians still argue whether it was ethical to deploy dogs into such extreme environments without a system to recover them afterward. The military called them equipment, but handlers called them brothers. In interviews after the war, generals defend the policy as necessary triage. Handlers call it betrayal. The truth? It's probably both. A strange story from your unit makes the rounds. A handler and his dog are separated during a night assault. The dog goes missing. The next day, after the firefight ends, the handler hears barking from a collapsed bamboo hut. They dig it out. The dog's inside, guarding a wounded child, not attacking, just standing between the girl and the rubble. Alive, unharmed. How'd he know to do that? No one can explain, but it happened. They named the dog Guardian. He didn't make a home. You finished the patrol without incident. Thanks to Scout, again. The night returns, thick and humming. You eat in silence. Scout chews some rice and beef you traded for. The rain starts again, soft this time. He curls beside you, head resting on your boot. And you think, not for the first time, if we both make it out alive, I'll find a way to bring him home. You won't, but you believe it. Tonight, anyway. And sometimes, that's enough. It's midnight when the jungle starts screaming. Not with voices, not at first, but with that sharp, gut-deep tone you now recognize as incoming fire. Somewhere to your west, maybe half a click out, a fire team stumbled into something ugly. The distant crack of M16s, the harder pop of AK-47s, the occasional thunderclap of a grenade. Scout is up instantly, fur raised, nose twitching. You rise too. Sleep never comes easy anyway. And check your gear in the red glow of a flashlight barely brighter than a cigarette ember. The firefight dies down quickly. That's always worse. You know the sounds of a losing battle. Short, brutal, finished by silence. Someone will go out at dawn to recover bodies. You hope it won't be you. Hey, remember how we said the dogs saved lives? Let's talk about what that looked like up close. You and Scout are often first out the wire in the morning. While the rest of the unit slings rifles and chews breakfast bars, you're already walking the perimeter, checking for tripwires, smelling out fresh footprints, tracking the tiny signs that say, someone's been here. Because the VC were ghosts in their own jungle. They moved at night, slipped past claymore mines, crawled under razor wire, planted surprises in the dirt while you dreamed of dry socks. And without the dogs, you'd never know. Some handlers called it the sixth sense. The way their dogs would freeze mid-step and tilt their heads, like they caught a whisper the jungle didn't want you to hear. You'd follow their lead every time, because not doing so meant detonating yourself into a footnote. Historical fact. In field reports, dog teams were estimated to have detected up to 60% of all ambushes on some patrol routes. That's more than any other tool or intelligence asset in the field. In fact, entire Special Forces teams often refuse to move without a scout dog at point. They delay missions, reroute helicopters, even scrub objectives if their dog team wasn't available. It wasn't superstition. It was math. The handlers lived longer when the dog was watching. You head out on a sweep after that midnight firefight. The rain's let up, but the jungle's still dripping, like it's trying to wring itself out. Every leaf is slick, every root a trip hazard. And that smell, wet cordite and burned bamboo. The scent of a place that's seen fire in the dark. Scout's moving slow, not tired, focused. He's in work mode now. You've learned to respect that gait. It means he's reading the air, reading the earth. You scan the trees, spider holes, nests, caches. Then, Scout stiffens. His ears flick. He growls low. You raise your fist. Behind that bush a body. Not VC. American. Young. Maybe 20. Mouth open. One boot missing. His legs bent wrong. You kneel beside him. He's cold. Scout whines, nudges the body's hand. You find his tags and call it in. Another recovery for the stats. But this one hits harder, because tucked under the soldier's arm, curled like a sleeping fox, is a dead Labrador retriever. One of yours, likely shot while guarding him. You place your hand on the dog's side and whisper, "Good boy." The rest of the squad arrives. They see what you saw. No one speaks for a long time. Fringe fact for you. During Vietnam, dogs came in all breeds, but German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Labs were favored for their versatility. Labs in particular were prized for sentry stealth. They could work in the dark without barking, only growling when danger was close. That made them perfect for ambush zones and terrifying to VC scouts. One North Vietnamese prisoner reportedly said, "The black dog that growls is more feared than the American with the machine gun." That's not bravado. That's respect. You get back to camp around sunrise. Your CO gives the order. You'll accompany a tunnel team later today. You sigh. Tunnel days are the worst. Not always literal crawling, but close. You'll move slow through vine-choked paths, scanning for holes in the ground like a macabre game of hide and seek. The VC built everything underground. Staging areas, sniper nests, ammo dumps. Sometimes, whole command centers. And you're the tripwire again. Scout's job is to signal if anything's off. Airflow changes, body scent, new dirt. He's good at it. You trust him. But you also know one wrong step, and that trust gets vaporized. The jungle gets thicker as the day grows hotter. Scout leads the way, tail low, steps deliberate. The other soldiers follow at a distance, not from disrespect, but from understanding. Dog teams operate differently. You and Scout are like your own tribe. The unit gives you space because they know your life hinges on nuance. His glance, his palm movement, the twitch of his nose. These are your warning bells. He stops suddenly. You freeze. He lowers his head, sniffs. Then he growls and backs up. That's the sign. A trap. You look down, and there it is. A single wire, nearly invisible, looped across a patch of dry ground, connected to a thin bamboo rod. You follow it with your eyes, and spot the edge of a bouncing Betty mine, half buried under leaves. If Scout hadn't stopped, you motion the squad back. Yodi will deal with it. But you and Scout, you live another hour. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll on handlers was adequately studied. While combat stress was well known, the bond between dog and man introduced a new kind of trauma, anticipatory grief. Every step was a roulette wheel. Every sniff was a coin toss. You weren't just afraid for yourself. You were terrified of watching your best friend die and not being able to stop it. Some handlers wrote that they felt more protective of their dogs than of themselves. One soldier said, "I could handle my own death. I couldn't handle his." That's a hard truth to unpack in a war zone where nothing stays clean. Later that night, the camp is quiet again. Scout sleeps at your side, muzzle twitching with dreams. Maybe he's chasing rabbits in that Iowa field you imagine for him sometimes. You clean his ears with a damp rag, check his paws for burrs, run your fingers through his fur, untangling knots and dry blood. This is the ritual, the part that no one teaches you in basic, the part that keeps you human. You hum to him softly, a song your mom used to sing. Scout blinks awake, tail thumping once. He's watching you now, and in that moment, beneath the shredded tarp roof and the ever-dripping leaves, you're just two souls in the dark. Not soldier and dog, just friends. And maybe, if the war doesn't swallow you whole, maybe someday you'll walk together through a quieter place. Maybe. You dream in dirt. When you finally close your eyes that night, everything's a blur of red clay and tangled undergrowth. Scout runs ahead of you in the dream, ears pricked, body blurred in motion. You try to follow, but the jungle pulls at your legs like wet cement. Somewhere behind you, voices scream. But ahead, Scout never looks back. And then you wake. The camp's already stirring. There's the rattle of mess kits, the low grumble of diesel engines, the quiet murmurs of men who know better than to talk too loud before patrol. Another day, another march, another chance to vanish. You sit up and Scout's already alert, watching your every move. He knows it's time. He always knows. Today's operation has a name, Hedge Cutter. You're heading into a hot zone. Intelligence says the VC have a weapons cache in the vicinity of a nearby hamlet, long since abandoned. But no one trusts abandoned anymore. Not here. Not ever. The dog's going first. Always. Scout's harness is snug. You check the buckles, test the radio wire, and loop his medallion, his dog tags, through your own for luck. It's bent and scratched from a dozen other missions. You wear it like it's holy. Historical fact. The U.S. Army formally established the Scout Dog Program during Vietnam, deploying trained canines primarily for point detection, ambushes, snipers, traps, and mines. Each team consisted of one handler and one dog, working in tandem. No backup, no second line. You either got it right the first time, or you didn't get second time. The survival rate for Scout dog teams? Statistically better than solo infantry, but emotionally, much, much worse. You're in the jungle by 0700. It's so humid you can feel your skin sagging. Every breath is a swim. You move slowly, the world narrowed to Scout's silhouette in front of you. Shoulders squared, head low, tail twitching with micro-adjustments as he reads the invisible. You glance at the others behind you. They trust him more than they trust you. And who can blame them? Fringe tidbit. Some handlers swore their dogs could sense tripwires before even stepping near them. Not by smell or sight, but by atmospheric changes. One soldier claimed his shepherd stopped cold 10 feet away from a claymore tripwire strung with black thread, in full shade, just because the air tasted funny. Was it instinct? Training? Magic? No one knew. But you never second-guess the dog. Ever. The path you're following splits around a copse of thick brush. Scout veers left, nose to ground. You raise a closed fist. Halt. He slows. Pauses. Then, ears perk up. Tail stiffens. And there's that low, throaty growl again. You grip your M16 tighter. And then, movement. Fast. 3 VC soldiers break from cover. One armed with an RPG, the other 2 with AKs. You drop low as Scout lunges and chaos unfolds. Gunfire shatters the canopy. Bark splitters. One of the VC drops. The other 2 disappear behind the brush. Scout stays close to your leg, teeth bared, waiting for the next command. This is how it goes. The dog finds the enemy before the enemy finds you. You never say thank you out loud. It's bad luck. But you give Scout a piece of jerky from your pouch when the shooting stops. He chews slow, like he's savoring something sacred. They find the weapons cache an hour later, buried beneath false flooring inside an old rice granary. Rusted mortars. Homemade mines. Ammo boxes marked with Chinese lettering. You let the demolition team handle it. You're too busy wiping blood off Scout's harness. You don't know if it's his blood or someone else's. And you're not sure it matters. Later, in the dusty heat of early afternoon, you hear the chopper rotors. Evac, not for you, but for the guy who took a round in the shoulder 2 clicks east. He'll live. Maybe. The chopper lands, spits out medics, and idles on the makeshift LZ, blades chopping the air like invisible razors. Scout watches the aircraft, ears tilted back. Not afraid, just waiting. You know what he's thinking. You both want to be on that bird. But you're not leaving today. Historians still argue whether the American military's reliance on war dogs in Vietnam truly altered the outcome of missions, or merely minimized loss. What's not debated? They changed the survivability of jungle warfare. A human can be ambushed. A tripwire can be overlooked. But a dog? A dog smells the sea for buried a foot under jungle mulch. A dog hears the click of a pressure plate under a bush. A dog feels the rhythm of a patrol long before you do. They were never weapons. They were warnings with fur. You return to base around sunset. Scout's paws are caked in mud. His belly scratched from crawling under thorny underbrush. You give him the river. Strip off his harness. Let him splash. For a moment, he's just a dog again, snapping at dragonflies, rolling in weeds. And you? You sit on the riverbank, boots off, smoking a cigarette you've lit with a shaking hand. It's not fear. Not exactly. It's the aftertaste of not dying. There's a chemical haze that clings to your nerves. Every mission that doesn't kill you adds another layer to your internal corrosion. But you sit there anyway, because you made it back. And Scout? He curls beside you when the sun dips behind the trees. Fringe detail you'd miss in the official reports. Some handlers slept with their dogs like teddy bears. Not just out of affection, but survival. The dog's body heat kept the soldier warm. Their presence was alarm. And in the nightmares that visited most nights, that steady breathing was the only thing that reminded you you're still alive. One night, a new guy joins the squad. He's from Indiana. Fresh boots, clean gun, the kind of face that hasn't yet figured out how to squint properly in jungle light. He sees Scout and says, "Man, that dog's badass." You nod. He asks, "So when do they rotate home?" The others fall silent. You speak, finally, because someone has to. They don't. The kid blinks. "What do you mean?" "Like, they stay here until the tour ends." You exhale slowly. "No, I mean they don't go back. Not ever." And that's the moment it sinks in for him. These animals, these sentries, saviors, soldiers in fur, they're all expendable. 4,000 came. Less than 200 returned. The rest? Abandoned. Euthanized. Left behind like spent gear. That's the part no one wants to say out loud. That's the part that doesn't make it into the Pentagon press briefings. But in the jungles of Vietnam, the war dogs fought bravely and died quietly, just like the men they followed. Scout dreams again. You can tell from the way his legs twitch in the darkness of your hooch, like he's still tracking something through the bush. Maybe it's a squirrel. Maybe it's a sniper. Either way, he's alert even in sleep. You envy that kind of commitment. Even the insects hush when he stirs. You lie awake beside him, blanket barely covering your chest, eyes fixed on the plywood ceiling above. The moonlight leaking through the canvas flap is dull, but enough to remind you, this is not home. Not even close. Morning comes fast. Another mission. They call it a routine recon. But if Vietnam has taught you anything, it's this. The moment someone says routine, you better write your last letter home. This time, you're deployed to the Iron Triangle, north of Saigon, a brutal tangle of thick jungle and underground fortifications. The NVA treat the place like sacred ground, and they've mined it like a cathedral. Scout walks ahead of you, slow and deliberate, his paws sinking silently into the jungle floor. Your eyes don't leave him. Your finger rests lightly on the trigger. Not tight, not loose, just ready. Historical fact. The Viet Cong dug an estimated 250 kilometers of tunnel in the Iron Triangle region alone. Some were barely large enough for a man to crawl through. Others were full-blown complexes with sleeping quarters, hospitals, and booby traps, tripwires rigged to grenades, spike pits hidden beneath rotted planks, and toe poppers designed to mutilate, not kill. In this place, death waits underground. That's why Scout goes first. The jungle opens into a strange clearing. Flat, unnatural, silent. That's the problem. Too silent. Scout freezes. His ears flick. His tail drops low. He smells something. Not animal. Not human. Chemical. You feel your throat tighten. Scout steps back. No growl. No bark. Just that slow, trembling hesitation that says, "Turn around now." You kneel beside him, eyes scanning the clearing. And there it is. A tripwire. Threaded through the tall grass. Nearly invisible. Scout found it before you did. Again. And maybe you just saved the whole platoon. Fringe tidbit. Some handlers claim that war dogs would refuse to enter a zone if they sensed too much death. Not present death, but death buried, forgotten, or seeping from the ground like swamp gas. One soldier from the 101st Airborne wrote in a letter home. He froze by a tree line once. Wouldn't move. Turns out the whole edge was rigged with punji pits. He sniffed ghosts, I swear to God. Ghost sniffers. That's what some started calling them. Back at base, you record today's save in your field notes. You've started a quiet ritual. Every time scouts save a life, you scratch a mark into your belt. There are 11 notches now. 11 men who live because of this dog. Because of this comrade. It's mail day. You get a letter from your sister. She asks if the dogs have little boots to protect their feet. You smile, just a little, and imagine trying to wrestle a boot on a Scout's massive paws. He'd chew it off before you could blink. You start writing back. You stop. Because what do you say? Scout found a bomb today. No one died. That's not the kind of sentence they print in family newsletters. The next day, it's demolition duty. You're escorting engineers into the bush to blow up a series of abandoned bunkers. Scout's role is perimeter security, sniffing for stragglers, surprises, or survivors. It's quiet, too quiet, until Scout starts pulling hard toward a patch of broken trees. He's on full alert now. Low growl, stiff legs, steady direction. You follow, and 20 feet in you find it. A body. Young. Vietnamese. Maybe 15, maybe 20. He's slumped near a rusted AK-47, his fingers still curled in a fist. Next to him, something glints in the dirt. A wire. Tripwire. Still live. You wave down the engineers. They defuse it. Another near miss. Another scratch for the belt. Historians still argue whether dogs in Vietnam were tools of war or victims of it. Military reports often list them under equipment. But handlers knew better. These animals felt things. They mourned. They bonded. Some even refused to eat when their handlers died. Was that instinct? Or something deeper? We still don't know. That night, a mine goes off near the south perimeter. Not yours. Another team's. You hear the explosion, the screaming, the mad rush of boots on gravel, and the whir of the medevac. Scout stays at your side, ears back, head low. You both listen until the noise fades. In the morning, you find out the dog was vaporized. The handler lost both legs. The mine had been hidden under a fake termite mound. That team didn't have a dog that day. They'd rotated him out due to exhaustion. Fringe anecdote. In rare cases, handlers reported dogs collapsing from psychological trauma. One Doberman was said to have suffered a kind of battlefield PTSD. After witnessing multiple men blown apart by an RPG, the dog refused to respond to commands for over a week, only whimpering in his kennel and chewing through his own leash. Some say animals don't remember war. They do. They just don't speak it. One morning, you wake up and Scout's not moving right. He limps on his front leg. You examine the paw and find a deep cut, probably from a rusted tin can or sharp bamboo. Nothing too serious, but enough to keep him off patrol for a few days. The medic bandages it up and tells you to rest him, but he won't sit still. He paces the edge of the kennel, barks when the squad moves out, scratches the door when you're gone. You see it in his eyes. He thinks you're leaving him behind. You don't. You bring him everywhere, even if it means carrying him. A week later, he's back to full strength. You've never seen anyone so happy to jump into danger. It's funny, isn't it? Most people fear war. Dogs like Scout fear absence, being left behind, being forgotten. One night, by lantern light, you and a few others sit around playing cards. Someone brings out a harmonica. Another guy hums an old Elvis tune. Scout lies beside your boots, head on his paws. The guy next to you says, "You ever think about what happens when this tour ends?" You nod slowly. He points at Scout. You think he'll go home with you. You hesitate. The answer is no. Everyone knows that. The military policy is clear. Scout dogs are classified as equipment, and most equipment doesn't make it home. He's served. He saved lives. But when your tour is over, he'll stay. You stare into the lantern glow, the smell of kerosene mixing with Scout's fur and the faint scent of gun oil. You don't cry. You just lean down, scratch behind his ears, and whisper, "I'll try, buddy." And you mean it, even if you know the odds. The monsoon returns in the middle of the night. Not a drizzle, not even a storm, a full-body deluge from the sky. You wake to water pouring off the roof like a faucet, mud pushing in under the flap of the hooch, and Scout growling at the thunder as though he could bite it in half. You're soaked before you've even stood up. Your poncho is somewhere under your pack, and even if you had it, it'd be like trying to hold back the Pacific with a napkin. Scout doesn't care. He's already at the edge of the hooch, tail twitching, nose pointed into the dark, waiting for your signal. Patrol in the rain is a different beast. Every drop becomes a whisper, Every branch a shadow. Mud clings to your boots like regret. The visibility? Barely arm's length. But you got Scout. And Scout's got his nose. He doesn't need light. Doesn't need sound. Just that low, invisible thread of scent, fear, sweat, gunpowder that cuts through the storm like radar. You move single file through ankle-deep slop, eyes flicking left and right, rifle raised. You keep one hand on Scout's harness. Not to guide him. He guides you. But just to remind yourself, you're not alone out here. Historical fact. During monsoon seasons in Vietnam, entire fire bases were swallowed by floods. Rain turned trails into rivers and camps into swamps. Soldiers often developed trench foot, skin infections, and worse. But the dogs? Most of them adapted. Their paws toughened, their hearing sharpened under the roar of rain, and many handlers swore they were even more accurate in the wet. Something about the scent blooming heavier in the humidity. Scout pauses. His head tilts. His ears flick forward. That look again. You follow his eyes and see nothing. But then, snap, a branch shifts. You freeze. Scout crouches, hackles rising. His body is tight as a loaded spring. You drop to a knee, scanning the underbrush. And then, just for a second, you catch it. A flash of black pajamas. One, maybe two figures. VC, moving slow, heads low, trying to flank. But Scout caught them first. A burst of motion, barking, gunfire. You hit the ground, return fire, and it's over in under 30 seconds. Your squad checks the perimeter. 2 enemy bodies. 1 wounded and captured. 0 Americans hit. Thanks to Scout. Again, quirky tidbit. Some handlers used to swear by a superstition. If your dog saved your life 3 times, you owed them a steak dinner when you got home. Problem was, few of the dogs made it home. So guys started burying steaks in the jungle instead, leaving little IOUs in the dirt with tin can crosses. He earned it, one handler wrote, even if he never gets to taste it. The rain lets up as you reach the fire base. Scout's belly is caked in red mud. His tail swipes low like a paintbrush. You're not much cleaner. Face streaked, boots half full of water. Every inch of your gear soaked to useless. But the smiles are real. Your squad slaps your back. Someone tosses Scout a piece of jerky, and the wounded VC is hauled off for interrogation. Another mission done. Another story no one will believe. That night, you sit under a poncho strung between ammo crates, scribbling into your field journal. Scout lies beside you, chin on your knee, tail thumping softly with each stroke of your pen. You write, Scout caught 2 in the trees. Save our skins. Again. You underline again twice. You don't mention how your hands were shaking when the firefight ended. You don't mention how close the bullet came to your ribs. But Scout knows. Dogs always know. Next morning, you get orders. Scout's being rotated out for rest and evaluation. You argue. Hard. Your CO doesn't budge. Dog needs downtime, he says, and so do you. You're assigned a temporary replacement. The new dog's name is Kaiser. Big, strong, but green. First patrol with Kaiser feels like walking blindfolded. He doesn't cue like Scout, doesn't crouch right. His attention wanders. You try not to hate him. It's not his fault. But every muscle in your body screams, this isn't my dog. Scout's new handler is a green recruit from Iowa. He doesn't know the signals, doesn't understand Scout's quirks. You watch them from a distance, heart tight. Scout glances your way, ears flicking like he doesn't understand the separation. The look breaks something in you, like handing off your best friend to a stranger, like watching your brother get drafted twice. Historians still argue whether the military rotation policy helped or harmed dog handler teams. Officially, it was meant to reduce dependency and allow broader training. But in practice, it often shattered bonds mid-deployment. Handlers protested. Some refused to hand over their dogs. A few even went AWOL with them. Those cases rarely ended well. 3 days later, word spreads. Scout's patrol hit a booby-trapped tunnel. No one died, but Scout's handler was injured, shrapnel to the leg. Scout pulled him free, dragged him 20 yards by the webbing of his vest. When the medics arrived, They said the dog wouldn't let anyone near the wounded man until he saw a patch on the uniform. Only then did he sit down and wait. You get a minute with him later. Scout limps a little. You kneel, and he presses his head into your chest like a child seeking shelter. You whisper, "They should be giving you medals." He licks your face once and settles in your lap. Somewhere behind you, the mortars start again. Scout doesn't flinch. That night, another handler tells a story around the fire. He knew a guy, Marine K9, 3rd Battalion, whose dog got shot. The vet said he wouldn't survive. The handler carried him 12 miles to the evac point. He lost half his unit on that trek, but the dog lived. Some men fight for country, the handler says. Some fight for home. He looks at the fire. Some just fight for the thing beside them. Rain falls again. You cover Scout with your poncho and curl around him. He sighs, deep and slow, like the jungle has finally exhaled. Fringe tidbit. A few handlers reported shared dream states with their dogs. Not scientific, not proven, but enough to raise eyebrows. One soldier wrote in his diary, "I dream of fire and canines." He whimpers in his sleep. Same nights. Every time. Maybe trauma has a smell. Maybe dogs dream what we survive. Later, in a rare moment of downtime, someone on base strings up a sheet and runs a projector. Bonanza, black and white, grainy and warped. Scout watches for a few minutes, ears flicking at the sound of horses. Then he turns, rests his head on your boot, and sleeps through the gunfights. Smart choice. Real life's loud enough. Back in your hooch, you scratch another mark into the belt. Not for a save, just for a moment survived. Outside, the jungle hums with life. The war never sleeps. But you do. Scout curls beside you. Warm, watchful, silent, together. Still here, still breathing. You wake before dawn, just as the mist rolls and low and thick across the base. Ghost breath from the jungle floor, curling over sandbags and mortar pits like a slow-moving tide. Scout is already awake. Always is. He's sitting upright, tail thudding quietly, ears forward, nose twitching toward the perimeter wire. You roll out of your hooch, stretch your back till the vertebrae pop, and rub your eyes. Sleep was shallow again, just deep enough to keep the ghosts at bay. You pat Scout's side. "Let's go see what today's nightmare looks like." He trots beside you. No leash needed. The two of you are shadows by now. Today's assignment isn't glamorous. You're sweeping a convoy route, clearing a stretch of road so the trucks can roll supplies through without catching an IED or rolling over a booby trap. It's tedious, slow, and deadly in the stupidest ways. The kind of job where one lazy step means a crater the size of a Jeep and a name etched on the wall back home. Scout knows the drill. You move 10 feet ahead of the squad, eyes scanning the dust and dirt for pressure plates, wires, anything off-pattern. Scout's snout hovers inches from the earth, working side to side in smooth sweeps, tail stiff like a metronome of dread. Mainstream fact. American war dogs in Vietnam were trained in multiple detection disciplines: booby traps, ambush scent, tunnels, and mines. Mine-detecting dogs especially had to be dual-confirmed before deployment, showing high success rates in field trials. They were often more accurate than mechanical mine sweepers and metal detectors, especially in dense, mineral-rich jungle where electronics failed regularly. But the pressure was constant. The stakes? Always final. You hear it first. That tiny shift in Scout's breathing. Not quite a growl, not a bark. Just a change in his exhale, as if he's holding tension in his lungs. He freezes. One paw lifted mid-step. You hold your breath. He noses a patch of dirt that looks just like the rest. Except it isn't. He sits and looks up at you. Signal confirmed. You call it in. The engineers check. Pressure mine. Tripwire looped under leaves. Would have taken out the second man in line. Someone claps your shoulder. That dog just bought me a beer I'll never forget. You don't answer. Your hands are shaking too hard. Fringe tidbit. Some handlers claimed their dogs could detect mines planted hours earlier, but not days. They said fresh human scent mattered, that dogs could smell the intent, not just the explosives. That sounds like superstition, but an Australian study decades later confirmed Explosive scent traces fade rapidly in high humidity unless replenished by contact. Maybe the dogs weren't sniffing TNT, they were sniffing us. Halfway down the route, you come across something else. A corpse. Vietnamese. Young. Maybe 15, maybe 30. It's hard to tell out here. Stripped shirtless, face down in the brush. Flies buzzing like static. Scout approaches, tail low, nose working. You pull him back gently. Nothing to find here. Just a memory waiting to be forgotten. You keep moving. Historians still argue whether mine-detecting dogs saved hundreds or thousands of lives in Vietnam. Official Army records were often incomplete. Field reports were burned, misfiled, or never written. But what we do know is this. The units that had dogs requested more, and the units without them, their casualty rates were statistically higher. Maybe it's anecdotal. Maybe it's all gut instinct. But ask any vet who worked with a dog and they'll tell you. We walked different when they were with us. The afternoon brings sun, not gentle warmth, jungle oven heat, the kind that boils sweat from your skin and makes your helmet feel like a cast iron skillet. You find a spot in the shade and give Scout his water first. He laps it up, eyes half closed, tail twitching in gratitude. You wish someone would treat you that well. A hummingbird buzzes by, and he flinches, growling under his breath. You both laugh. Then the call comes in. A patrol 5 clicks north walked into a punji pit. 1 dead, 2 wounded. Need backup. Might be an ambush. Your squad scrambles. You're in the chopper within minutes. Rotors thundering, Scout between your knees, ears pinned flat from the wind. The jungle blurs below, green chaos stretching to the edge of the world. You touch the patch on your vest. K9 unit. The pilot shouts over the noise. Tell him what to find us some trouble. You nod. He always does. The landing zone is hot. Not gunfire. Yet but nervous. Your boots hit the mud, and you're already moving. Scout leads. Straight into the trees. No hesitation. You pass the wounded patrol. Medics hauling one on a stretcher. Another limping with blood running down his thigh. They look up at you. And it's Scout. One of them raises a weak fist. Find those bastards, yeah? You nod once. You intend to. It doesn't take long. Scout picks up a trail. A scent laced with human sweat and adrenaline. He moves faster, tail stiff, nose low, body tense. You move through brush so dense it grabs your rifle, tears your sleeves. Then he stops, sits, looks back. The signal. Booby trap. You scan. There it is. Tripwire. Low and taut. Rigged to a grenade in a tin can. Scout sits like he's waiting for you to be impressed. You are. You mark it, call in, and keep moving. Quirky moment. There was a K9 unit nicknamed the Barking Dead. Not for any tactical reason, but because the dogs refused to bark on command. No matter how well trained, no matter the drill, they wouldn't do it. But the handlers noticed something stranger. When they did bark in the field, unprovoked, it always meant enemy contact within 5 minutes. The unit stopped using radios. They just followed the dog's ears. By the end of the day, you found 3 traps, 1 dugout, and what looks like a sniper perch abandoned in a hurry. Scout is panting hard. You carry him the last half-mile back to the chopper. He doesn't resist. Just rests his chin on your shoulder. His heart thumps against your chest like a second heartbeat. Back at base, someone's cleaned your hooch. Probably the new guy. Or maybe the doc. Doesn't matter. You let Scout eat from your ration pack. He picks the beef jerky clean, then flops on your cot like a drunk uncle on a holiday couch. You sit beside him, rubbing the dirt from his paws, checking for cuts. His eyes close slowly, like shutters in a storm. You say softly, "Don't you dare die on me." He flicks his tail once, like a promise. That night, someone strings up fairy lights outside the mess tent. Tiny glowing beads stolen from a downed Christmas shipment. The jungle looks almost peaceful. You and a few other handlers sit in folding chairs, dogs at your feet, sipping warm beer and watching lightning bugs dance like tracer rounds without anger. It's the first time in days you hear someone laugh without sarcasm. Even Scout's tail thumps now and then. One of the handlers starts a story. There was a mud in Da Nang. Looked like a mop with teeth. Smelled like an open drain. But he found a sniper once, by peeing on his hideout. Guy shot at us. Dog ran up, marked his tree, and we lit it up. Another guy chuckles. That's some golden retriever justice. Fringe tidbit. Several handlers reported their dogs exhibiting ghost patrol behaviors, wandering at night toward empty bunkers, sitting by abandoned gear, howling at nothing. One handler insisted his dog stopped beside a tree where a friend had died weeks earlier and refused to move. Another swore his dog barked 3 times every midnight, always facing east. The vets chalked it up to training, but some believe it was morning. Scout stirs in his sleep, paws twitching. You wonder what he dreams. Running? Chasing? Or maybe he dreams of home. Not your home. His. Wherever that might be. You lie back, staring up at the stars. No noise tonight. No mortars. Just the chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the deep, even breathing of a dog who's earned his sleep. You reach over, lay a hand on his ribs, feel the rise and fall. Still here. Still yours. For now. The monsoon hits just before dawn. Not a drizzle. Not even a storm in the way most people understand storms. No, this is the jungle opening up her sky like a wound, dumping oceans in sheets so thick you can't see your own hand in front of your face. You wake to the sound of it slapping canvas, hammering tin, flooding the latrines, and soaking everything not nailed down or wrapped in plastic. Scout doesn't flinch. He's curled up at the foot of your cot, paws tucked tight, tail coiled around his body. When you rise, he lifts his head just a little, groans, and sets it back down with a look that says, "Don't even think about it." But of course you do, because the war doesn't care if you're wet. The war doesn't care if your boots are rotting, if your socks are soaked through, if your dog smells like mildew and swamp rot. The war runs on schedules and bad coffee, and right now, you've got a dawn patrol through terrain that's more swamp than land. You drag on your poncho. It makes no difference. Within minutes, you're drenched. The rain changes everything. Trails vanish. Mud sucks at your boots like a hungry mouth. Rivers swell into brown monsters that chew through roads and erase entire footpaths. The jungle breathes steam, and your rifle fogs up every other step. Scout trudges ahead, nose low, tail flicking water in rhythmic pulses. He's not happy, but he's working, always working. The rain doesn't wash away scent like you might think. It smears it, makes it harder to pin down, like tracking through a kaleidoscope. Mainstream fact. Contrary to popular belief, trained dogs can still detect human scent in heavy rainfall. The scent molecules stick to surfaces, especially vegetation, and dogs use a mix of ground tracking and air sniffing to trace paths even after hours of downpour. Some K9 units in Vietnam were trained specifically for wet season operations, adapting their routines for flooded terrain and thicker foliage. Today is one of those days. You're halfway up a hillside when Scout freezes. That same full-body stillness. Not the minefield kind. Something else. He huffs once. Low. Then turns his head slightly, ears pinned back. You feel the muscles tense along your own spine, like you're part of the same animal now. You motion for the squad to halt. You listen. Then you hear it, too. Voices, distant, muffled by the rain, but distinct. Vietnamese, fast and agitated. Movement just up the ridge. You raise your fist. Wait. Scout doesn't move. The patrol drops low, fans out behind cover. Then someone, probably the new guy, steps on a branch. Snap. It's not loud, but it's enough. Gunfire rips down the hill like tearing paper. You hit the mud. Bullets cut, leaves overhead. Scout stays low. He's been trained for this. Fringe tidbit. In the field, some dogs were trained not just to detect danger, but to disappear when it started. One popular command was ghost, a silent signal where the dog would immediately flatten against the ground and go still. No barking, no movement. The idea was to protect the animal and preserve the element of surprise. Scout's ghost mode is flawless. When it counts, he vanishes better than you do. The firefight is brief, but brutal. 3 VC pulled from the trees. 1 runs. Scout tugs the leash so hard your wrist almost snaps. You let go. He's gone in a blur of mud and teeth. You follow. Branches claw your face. Rain stings your eyes. You hear it before you see it. A yelp, a snarl, a grunt. Then silence. You find a near tree fall. Scout standing over a man with a torn sleeve and blood on his leg. He's not moving. The dog stands stiff, not attacking, just watching. Waiting. You grab the leash. Pull Scout back. He obeys. Barely. You're both breathing hard. You don't say a word. Just walk back to the squad. Rain soaking through your soul. Historians still argue whether war dogs were combatants or equipment. The U.S. Army officially classified them as the latter, non-personnel assets. That's why they weren't guaranteed return transport, burial honors, or even medical treatment in many cases. Handlers, however, almost universally saw them as partners. Some even added their dogs' names to patrol logs, after-action reports, and casualty lists, treating them like any other member of the unit. You understand that more and more. Scout's not a pet. He's your shadow, your conscience, sometimes your better half. Back at base, the rain lets up by dusk. Everything smells like mildew and diesel fuel. You sit under a lean-to with Scout at your feet, drying your socks over a makeshift grill that someone's repurposed from a mortar crate. Someone tosses you a letter. It's from home. You read it slowly. A few jokes. A photo of your niece in a Halloween costume. She's dressed as a cowboy. You show the picture to Scout. He tilts his head, licks your wrist. You figure that means not bad. That night, you sleep fitfully. Dream of rice paddies and men in black pajamas. Dream of Scout running ahead, tail wagging, until he vanishes into smoke. You wake in the middle of the night. Scout's beside you, breathing even. You don't touch him. Just watch. Just listen. Making sure. The next morning, orders change. You're being rotated to a different base. Something farther north, closer to the DMZ. More danger, they say. Better visibility, too. You'll be attached to a different infantry unit. One that's never worked with dogs before. You pack light. Scout knows something's up. He keeps circling your gear, sniffing your boots, glancing at the Jeep with ears pinned flat. You whisper, "It's just another ride, buddy. We'll be back before the jungle forgets our names." He huffs. You both know it's a lie. Quirky note. Some handlers started giving their dogs rank, calling them Sergeant Scout or Private Max. The military never recognized it, but the tradition served a purpose. A dog with a rank was part of the team. You'd never abandon a sergeant. You wouldn't leave a corporal behind. You couldn't explain it to brass, but in the field, it made sense. It felt right. Scout, he's a captain in your book, at least. You load up in a convoy and head out. Scout rides up front, ears flicking at every bump. The road north cuts through hills shrouded in mist and burned patches of elephant grass. You pass wreckage, burned out trucks, rusted bikes, bones stripped clean by time and termites. Scout stares straight ahead. He doesn't flinch. You take his cue. The new base isn't much to look at. Half-built bunkers, a few tents, too many wide-eyed kids with gear that still smells new. The CO gives you the usual speech. Glad to have a dog team. Don't get too attached. You nod. Say nothing. Scout sniffs the ground like he owns it. Within an hour, he's already found a forgotten tripwire by the latrine. Welcome to the front. That night, a sniper opens up from the tree line. 2 shots, then silence. The men scramble. Scout bolts from his cot and presses his body against the door flap, growling low, ears like radar. You follow. Flashlights cut the darkness. Shouts echo down the valley. Scout barks once, sharp, urgent. Then again, you follow him into the trees. Find nothing, just boot prints. But you mark the spot. Tomorrow, you'll go hunting. You lie awake longer than usual. Scout curls up beside you, his body warm against your hip. You think about all the roads you've walked together, all the traps, all the silence, all the things you never said, because no one would believe them anyway. You think about the fact that, technically, Scout is equipment. You stroke his fur. He leans into your touch, then sighs. You whisper, "You're not a tool. You're not gear. You're mine." He doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. Morning again, but not the gentle kind, where light spills quietly through jungle leaves like honey. This one arrives like an ambush, smoke, shouting, and the dull thump of mortars in the distance. You sit up fast, hand on your rifle, already sweating. Scout is already awake, already standing, already watching the horizon with the kind of stillness that makes you feel slow, clumsy, like you're waking up in a world he never went to sleep in. You scramble into your gear. He doesn't need a leash anymore, not unless the brass insists. He sticks to your side like a trained shadow, every step matching yours, every pause a mirror. He's seen enough now. He knows the tempo of war. You whisper, "Let's see what the fuss is." Turns out, it's a village. A real one. Houses of thatched palm and tin, children in shorts too big for them. A market that smells of dried fish and oil. The report says Viet Cong sightings. Possible tunnels nearby. You're sent in to sniff around. Literal orders. You and Scout walk a perimeter while the squad fans out. The villagers watch with flat faces. Some curious, some cold. You've been through this dance before. Mainstream fact, by 1968, the U.S. had adopted a growing strategy of using scout dogs in village sweeps, believing they could detect tunnel entrances, weapons caches, or VC hiding among civilians. While successful in some cases, the practice sparked deep resentment among locals, who viewed the dogs as instruments of invasion, especially in a culture where dogs were not held in high regard. Scout doesn't care. He just wants the scent. He pulls left, then right, then stops cold. You feel the leash jerk. He begins pawing at a bamboo mat behind one of the houses. Low growl. You step forward, carefully peeling back the mat. Tunnel entrance. Just 2 feet across, descending in a blackness that smells of earth and sweat. You radio it in. The engineers arrive 15 minutes later, led by a guy named Ortiz who's chewing gum and carrying 3 flashlights strapped to his chest. Tunnel rat's job, he mutters, then looks at you. Then Scout. "No way," you say. "He's not going in there." Quirky detail. Some tunnel dogs were trained to go into the Viet Cong's underground networks. These tunnel scouts would descend into the tight, airless burrows ahead of handlers, trained to signal if they found movement or tripwires. Most dogs hated it. A few excelled at it. Scout, though, no thanks. He's brave, not stupid. Ortiz slides in himself. Scout sits at the tunnel's edge, staring into the dark like it personally insulted him. He stays like that until Ortiz comes back up with an old French rifle and a half-eaten meal still warm. "Someone was just down there," he says. The sweep turns up nothing else. No bodies. No suspects. Just another almost. You get back to camp just before dusk. Scout's tail doesn't wag. He's got that storm-brewing posture. Ears cocked, steps heavy, head low. Something's off, you whisper, and you believe it, because by now, you've learned to trust his instincts more than your own. Historians still argue whether dogs like Scout prolonged lives or merely delayed death. Some accounts claim K-9 teams reduced casualties by as much as 70% on patrols they led. Others argue that the over-reliance on dogs put too much faith in a single sense, one that could be jammed by weather, wind, or clever enemy tactics. But in that twilight silence, while Scout stands still as a statue, you don't question it. He's right again. He always is. That night, the base is hit. Rockets, screams, flashes on the ridgeline like devil's lightning. You and Scout are in the comms bunker when it starts. You dive under the table. Scout flattens beside you, trembling, not in fear but anticipation. He's waiting for a command, for permission to move, for you to say it's okay to charge into fire. You don't say it. You just wait, and breathe, and listen. The attack is over in minutes. Feels like hours. 3 dead, 7 injured. 1 radio operator gone without a trace, likely vaporized by the first shell. The medics work by flashlight. You help dig through rubble. Scout finds a collapsed sandbag wall that smells like blood. They pull a corporal out with a broken leg. He survives because of that moment. You give Scout half your rations that night. He eats without complaint, then curls against your thigh like nothing happened. But you don't sleep. Not really. The next week bleeds by. Scout leads patrols through jungle where everything wants you dead. Leeches, punji pits, snipers, tigers, even wasps the size of your fist. You learn how to move like him. Silent, cautious, half-gliding. He learns how to read your moods, too. If you're tense, he slows. If you're calm, he scans more actively. You've become a two-person system. Half soldier, half animal. All instinct. You hear rumors that some units are rotating dog back home. Just rumors. But they plant seeds. You start writing letters. One to your CO. One to a senator you've never met. You ask about Scout's future. You say, if he survives this war, he deserves more than a crate and a bullet. You get no reply. Just another assignment. Just another patrol. Then comes the hill. It doesn't have a name. Just a number. Hill 370. Everyone groans when they hear it. High ground. Too quiet. Too open. Ambush country. You and Scout are lead team. It's a 2-day crawl. You pack light. Rations. Extra leash. Morphine. Scout carries his own gear in a vest. Water bottles. Small first aid kit. Even a laminated card with your name and blood type. Fringe note. Some handlers carried dog tags for their animals. Homemade. Punched from aluminum or carved from wood. Not official, but heartfelt. If Scout dies, you want someone to know his name. You made one for him last week. It hangs from your bootlace, resting near your ankle. Up the hill, the world narrows. Every step is a guess. Every rustle, a possible tripwire. Scout moves in arcs, left, then right, then forward, tail stiff, ears flicking. At one point, he freezes and lies flat. You wave the squad down. You check his gaze. And there it is, a boot print. Fresh, facing downhill. You trace the trail to a sniper's nest hidden in a dead tree trunk. One grenade later, it's gone. You look at Scout. He licks your hand. You almost cry. You don't. You move on. That night, on top of the hill, the world opens. Stars like shattered glass. Scout lies beside you, head on your thigh, nose twitching at wind you can't feel. You talk to him softly. Tell him about home, about fields and parks and hydrants, about meat that isn't canned and grass that isn't trying to kill you. You tell him he'll make it. You tell him you'll fight for that, even if no one listens, even if you're the only one who sees him as more than a tool. He snores. You laugh, quietly. Tomorrow you go back down. New assignment, new kill zone, new ghosts. But for tonight, it's just you, him, the stars, and the jungle breathing. You close your eyes, and for once, sleep comes easy. Morning isn't always cruel. Today it drifts in soft, over a misted jungle slope. The sun's first gold doesn't stab, it drapes. You blink, stretch, crack your neck, and feel something warm on your foot. Scout's chin. He's still asleep, tail twitching through some private dream. Probably chasing a squirrel that owes him money. You don't wake him. Not yet. You just sit there on hill 370, listening to nothing but insects and the breeze brushing bamboo. For once, there's no gunfire, no boot-thumping urgency, no barked orders, just the quiet and a moment you don't trust. Because in Vietnam, silence is almost never peace. It's usually a trap. But for now, maybe it's mercy. An hour later, you're marching downhill, legs aching, back wet from the humidity that never really leaves. Your squad's quiet, half of them limping, the other half just lost in thought. Scout's not quiet. He's alert, tail straight, nose twitching, head on a swivel. He smells something, and that always means trouble. You hold up a fist. Everyone stops. He leads you 10 paces into a thicket. You follow, heart climbing into your mouth. Then you see it, a tripwire, thin as a hair, stretched between two roots. Booby-trap grenade on a lever. Would have taken a man's foot off. Maybe worse. Scout sniffs once, growls low, then pees on the base of the trap. That's one way to disarm it. Mainstream fact. More than 10,000 Americans were wounded or killed by landmines and booby traps in Vietnam. War dogs like Scout saved lives not just by detecting movement, but by identifying buried devices, sometimes even recognizing tripwires by smell or subtle differences in soil. You radio it in. One of the engineers comes to handle it properly. You and Scout move on. 10 lives saved, and it's not even noon. By the time you reach the camp, you're more shadow than soldier. Mud to your knees, clothes stiff with sweat and grime, rifle slung loose. Everyone's dragging, except Scout. He prances in like he just won the war. He gets a full can of beef that night. You split your crackers with him. He eats like royalty, then flops beside the squad's fire pit while you all swap jokes and lies. You're mid-story about a rat in a latrine when the new guy, Private Hensley, fresh out of Texas, asks the question, "So, what happens to the dogs when we go home?" You freeze. Everyone freezes. Scout lifts his head, as if he knows what that means. Nobody answers, because nobody wants to say it. The truth's ugly. You know it. You've known it. You've heard it in the barracks at night, passed between men who'd been here longer. Most of these dogs, they're not going back. No parade. No retirement farm. No gentle old age curled on a porch. Just a needle. Or worse. They call it equipment loss. Like a truck left behind. Like a radio blown out. Like ammo spoiled in the rain. Historians still argue whether the U.S. military truly believed the dogs were a risk to bring home. Some insist it was fear of disease, canine-specific viruses that could jump borders. Others suggest it was logistics, paperwork, or politics. But for handlers on the ground, none of that mattered. What mattered was their partner, their friend, their four-legged foxhole buddy. You remember what the old sergeant told you. They don't even get flags. It festers. You try not to think about it. But Scout looks at you that night, deep, steady, trusting, and your gut turns. You decide you're going to do something. You start by writing again. Not a letter this time. A report. You file it under urgent humanitarian concern. You list Scout's skills, his service record, the lives he's saved, the missions he's led. You type until your fingers cramp. Then you steal an extra hour on the comms unit to get sent out. You don't know if it'll work, but you have to try. Quirky detail. Some soldiers smuggle their dogs home. Literally. They'd forge orders, bribe cargo clerks, hide dogs in duffel bags, or ship crates labeled equipment. A few succeeded. Most didn't. One infamous case involved a dog flown in a crate labeled medical instruments. The handler risked court-martial. He said it was worth it. The dog lived to be 12. You think about that. A lot. Next day, you're reassigned. New sector. Deeper jungle. This one's different. Hostile territory. No friendly locals. No radio towers. Barely a trail. They give you 2 days of rations and no backup. You win your mud okay with that. The lieutenant asks it like a joke. You say, he's better than backup. Scout yawns. The jungle swallows you. Day 1. Rains so hard it flattens grass. Scout gets soaked, shakes himself off, then finds dry ground under a banana leaf bigger than your torso. You sit with him, share a strip of jerky. That night, he barks once in the dark. You wake just in time to see a snake slithering near your boot. You throw your knife. Miss. Scout lunges. Doesn't. You bury the viper. Whisper thanks. He licks your face. Gross. You love it. Day 2. Trail's gone. You're moving blind. Scout sniffs constantly, tense, no tail wagging. You get the feeling something's watching. You're right. Ambush. 3 VC fighters in black pajamas open fire from the tree line. You hit the dirt. Scout bolts left. Gunfire crackles. You scream his name. Seconds feel like lifetimes. Then silence. Then rustle. He's back. Panting. Unharmed. You see a torn sleeve dangling from his mouth. Won the VC. Bitten. You don't ask. You hug him. Tight. You make it back 2 days later. Scraped. Shaken. But whole. The CEO actually claps you on the back. Says you did good. Mentions something about commendation paperwork. You don't care. You only ask one thing. Any word about Scout? He just shrugs. Says, dogs don't get medals. Then walks away. That night, you can't sleep. Scout's curled up beside your cot. Snoring again. You envy his peace. But you can't stop thinking about what's coming. You got a month left. 30 days. Then the orders say you rotate out. Freedom. Clean sheets. Coffee. Silence. A place where people don't try to kill you before breakfast. But Scout? He's got nothing lined up. No home. No handler. No promise. Just a future shaped like a black bag in a quiet room. You write again. This time to your congressman. You don't care if it makes waves. You ask for adoption authorization. You say you'll cover transport. You'll sign whatever forms. You'll pay out of pocket. You'll do anything. He deserves that, more than anyone else you've served with. You sign the letter. Respectfully, Sergeant First Class. Your name, K9 Team, 4th Infantry. You don't hear back. Not for a while. But the rumor mill starts spinning. Someone else in camp got word. A dog was approved for transport. Special circumstance. Medical exception. Not scout. Not yet. But it gives you hope. And in Vietnam, hope's rare enough to be currency. You cling to it. Scout, meanwhile, chases fireflies. He doesn't know. You wish you could keep it that way. Forever. For now, all you can do is wait. Patrol. Feed him. Let him sleep on your boots. You sit by the perimeter fence, looking at stars again. You whisper promises. You swear oaths. He curls beside you, tail thumping once. Then again. He trusts you. Now all you have to do is find a way to keep that promise. The heat feels heavier today, not just in your clothes or against your neck. It's something thicker, like the sky's holding its breath, like the jungle knows something you don't. Even Scout, usually bounding ahead, is quieter. He walks closer to you now, steps more cautious, nose lower to the ground, like he's listening for ghosts. And in a way, he is, because you've reached what they call the Dog Hill Graveyard. No signs, no flags. Just a clearing with mounds of dirt and small wooden markers, some already rotted down to splinters. Names carved with bayonet tips. Dates scratched in mud. Some say Kia, others say nothing. This is where handlers buried their dogs. Their friends. When they didn't make it home. You kneel before one marker. It just says, Larry, good boy. No rank. No unit. No last name. But to someone, he meant the world. Scout sniffs it, then lies down next to it. Not sleeping, just quiet. Like he knows. It hits harder than gunfire. Because this is what you're fighting. Not just ambushes and booby traps. You're fighting erasure. Indifference. The quiet forgetting of animals who did everything asked of them, and then disappeared without a trace. Mainstream fact, between 1965 and 1973, roughly 4,000 dogs were deployed to Vietnam as part of U.S. combat operations. These dogs served as sentries, trackers, mine detectors, tunnel explorers, and companions. But when the war ended, only about 200 were brought home. The rest were classified as surplus equipment and either euthanized, handed off to the South Vietnamese military, or abandoned. Most Americans never even knew, because it wasn't talked about. Not in the papers, not in speeches, not even in the textbooks. That night, around the squad fire, the guys swap ghost stories. Someone tells the tale of a handler whose dog dragged him out of a burning chopper, only to be killed by sniper fire the next morning. Someone else says there's a jungle trail where you can still hear barking, no matter how far you walk. Hensley makes a crack about ghost mutts. You don't laugh. Neither does Scout. He's up, ears pricked, staring into the trees. And for just a second, you swear you do hear something. A bark. Faint. Echoing from nowhere. Maybe it's just your nerves. Maybe not. You fall into a routine again. Scout's still working miracles. He finds another tripwire 2 days later. Flushes out a sniper, hiding in a collapsed pagoda. Even drags a wounded soldier back to cover during a firefight. Takes a bullet in the vest doing it. Doesn't even whimper. Just waits for his treat. You give him 2. And the rest of your jerky. Because that kind of courage doesn't come with a medal. But it should. Fringe detail. Some handlers swore their dogs could sense landmines by vibration. That their paws, evolved over thousands of years, could pick up subtle tremors in the soil, like the heartbeat of death. No proof. No science to back it. Just stories. Hundreds of them. You don't need proof. You've seen it. Scout's nose twitches. You follow. And that's how a squad avoids stepping into an IE-to-rig ditch that would have turned your bodies into red mist. No science needed. Just instinct. And a good dog. But even legends get tired. Scout's limping now. Not badly, but enough for you to notice. The vet says it's wear and tear. Joint stress. Jungle knees. He recommends reduced patrols. You recommend the vet go to hell. You fight it. With brass. with memos, with louder and louder demands. You tell them Scout earned his ride home. You threaten to write to the Pentagon, to leak the story. You don't know who'll care, but somebody has to, right? Historians still argue whether the U.S. military ever intended to bring the dogs back. Some say early plans did include canine retirement programs. Others claim budget cuts and bureaucratic snags made it impossible. Either way, no system was put in place until decades later, long after Scout's generation was gone. That knowledge sinks deep into your gut, because you know the truth. Scout was never supposed to come home. They only trained him to save people, not to be saved himself. 3 weeks left. You wake to a rustling in the tent. Scout's not on your cot. You panic. Boots on, rifle slung. You storm outside, heart punching your ribs. You find him near the mess tent. He's sitting in the moonlight, chewing something. A letter. Your letter. The one you kept. The one with your request to adopt him. Marked denied. How he got it, you don't know. Why he chewed it, you might. Maybe he knows what it means. Or maybe he's just hungry. You sit beside him, stroke his ears, promise him you'll find another way, even if it kills you. The next day, something shifts. An officer pulls you aside, says, "Sergeant, you got a phone call." You blink. Nobody gets calls out here. It's your congressman, or at least his secretary. She says, "We got your letter." The congressman was moved. He's pushing a special exemption for Scout under Humanitarian Clause C.19. There's no guarantee, but we're trying. You nearly drop the phone. Scout licks your hand, as if to say, "Told you." The camp's different after that. You start walking taller, even as the days tick down, even as the missions keep coming. Scout keeps proving himself. You keep counting sunsets, because now there's hope. Real, actual, maybe this could happen hope. And you don't dare lose it. You start planning. Where he'll sleep. What food he'll eat. What vet you'll take him to. You imagine him on your couch, stealing your pillow, barking at the TV. You imagine peace. For both of you. But the jungle's not done with you yet. 5 days before your rotation out, you get assigned to a final sweep. Low risk, they say. Just a mop-up. You almost decline. You almost lie. Say Scout's sick. Or you're injured. But the lieutenant insists. And orders are orders. So you go. 3 clicks into the mission. It all goes wrong. A sniper opens fire from the ridge. Scout breaks formation. Charges. Then a sound. High-pitched. Sharp. And the forest explodes. IED. Heat. Flame. Shrapnel. Screaming. You black out. When you wake, everything's ringing. You're covered in dirt. There's blood. Some of it's yours. Most of it's not. You sit up. Scream his name. Once. Twice. Then movement. Scout limping toward you. Ear torn. Blood on his flank. But alive. Barely. He collapses on your lap. You whisper into his fur. "We're going home, buddy. We're going home." You don't even care if it's a lie. You don't remember the ride back to base. Someone must have carried you both. Because the next clear memory is of fluorescent lights stinging your eyes and antiseptic burning your nose. Scout's beside you on a gurney, wrapped in gauze, for in his paw, breathing ragged, but breathing. The medic says, "Lucky mutt. Missed his lungs." You mutter, "He's not lucky. He's unstoppable." For 2 days, neither of you moves much. You drift in and out of consciousness, your ribs packed like crumpled sandbags. Scout snores in rhythm with your EKG. Your tent's filled with cards, none addressed to you. All save for the dog. One even has a stake taped inside. It smells terrible, but the gesture lands. And for the first time in weeks, you laugh. Painfully, but still. Mainstream fact. By the early 1970s, military working dogs, MWDs, had become essential to U.S. patrols in Vietnam. According to the Department of Defense, these dogs saved over 10,000 American lives by detecting ambushes, booby traps, and enemy positions. In multiple units, handlers and their dogs developed such cohesion that commanding officers began giving dogs pseudo-ranks, typically one higher than their handler, to enforce respect among troops. Fringe detail. There's a myth that somewhere in the Mekong Delta, a handler tattooed his dog's ear with a tiny sergeant chevron. No evidence. No photos, just whispers. But you believe it. You want to believe it. Because in your world, these animals earn their stripes. The congressman calls again. This time, it's his actual voice. He says, "Your exemption was approved. Scout's coming home." Just like that. You drop the receiver. Scout perks his head up from the floor like he knows. Maybe he does. Maybe dogs just sense joy. Or maybe he's confused because you're suddenly crying and laughing and punching the cot all at once. Either way, he wags his tail. First time in days. But the paperwork isn't done yet. And Vietnam's still on fire. And Scout still needs to be processed like a crate of ammo. They run him through quarantine, vaccinations, behavioral assessments. They weigh him, measure his bite strength, scan his teeth. Then, finally, a sergeant hands you a manila folder with one sentence inside. Scout, MWD, cleared for repatriation, stamped in red. You don't realize you're saluting until after your hand's at your temple. Scout just licks your elbow. His salute. You spend your last 2 nights walking him around base. No leash, no command, just a man and a dog who defied the odds. Guys in a mess hall give you their extra rations. Officers nod from their tents. Someone even slips Scout a beer. He doesn't like it, but he drinks it anyway, because he's polite. The final morning's weirdly quiet, like the jungle's letting you go. Like it knows this time, you're not coming back. You board the C-130 transport with Scout in a special crate. Air holes drilled with loving precision. His name stenciled in black. A peanut butter jar inside. A blanket you've both bled on folded next to him. He doesn't bark. He doesn't whine. He just looks at you through the slats. Calm. Trusting. Like he knows. Historians still argue whether the military brass even noticed when dogs like Scout were finally granted permission to return. The shift in policy came from the bottom up, from handlers who refused to shut up, from journalists who started asking questions, and from politicians pressured by public empathy. Some records even suggest the Scout Clause helped push broader reforms in MWD treatment, ultimately paving the way for the Canine Members of the Armed Forces Act decades later. But that's hindsight. Right now, you just need the plane to take off, which it does. Wheels groan, engines howl, and just like that, you're in the sky. The U.S. is colder than you remember. Gray skies, steel hangars. You land at Travis Air Force Base. A small crowd claps as you step down the ramp. But they're not clapping for you. They're clapping for Scout. Someone holds up a sign that says, "Welcome home, hero." You tear up again. Scout yawns. You're both exhausted, but you're finally safe. The adoption takes another 2 weeks. More signatures, more forms, more red tape than a nuclear sub. But on February 5th, 1973, Scout is officially yours. Legally, permanently. You throw away your uniform that night. Keep the dog tags. Burn the rest. Scout gets a new collar, soft leather, no rank. You carve his name into it yourself. Not MWD Scout, just Scout. Because from now on, he's not government property. He's family. At home, everything feels too quiet. No jungle sounds. No bugle calls. No explosions. Just birds. Wind through trees. And the soft chink of Scout's tags against his bowl. He sleeps at the foot of your bed now. Sometimes snores. Sometimes twitches like he's dreaming of patrols. Once, during a thunderstorm, he bolts under the table and growls at the thunder like it owes him money. You lie beside him and hum till he calms. It's the least you can do. You try civilian jobs. Don't last long. Too quiet. Too fake. But Scout adjusts quickly. Learns the mailman's scent. Becomes a regular at the local diner. Even gets a parade during Veterans Week. Kids pet him. Old-timers salute him. One lady knits him a scarf. He wears it proudly, even though it's pink, because he's secure like that. One day, you visit a school to tell your story. Scout's in the front row. Sits patiently while you describe the horrors he saw, the lives he saved, the friends you both lost. When the bell rings, a little girl with a ponytail walks up and asks, "Is he brave?" You kneel beside her, place her tiny hand on Scout's head, and say, "He's the bravest soul I've ever met." Scout wags. Girl giggles. It's a moment you seal inside your ribs. Forever. Fringe tidbit. There's an urban legend that one of the returning dogs from Vietnam was trained to sniff out lies. They say he worked with a therapist, laying his paw on the knee of any veteran who claimed they were fine but wasn't. Nobody knows if it's true, but Scout does something similar. Every time you sit too still or stare too long at the window, he nudges your arm, then your chest, then climbs right into your lap. 60 pounds of fur and unspoken love. Like he's telling you, you don't have to pretend. I was there too. And so the years pass. Scout gets slower, grayer, still sharp, still noble. But his muzzle frosts, his steps falter, and you know the jungle's finally catching up to him. You dread it. You rehearse it. You beg for more time. But the day comes, as it always does. He looks at you one morning and just doesn't get up. You carry him to the vet. You stay until the very end. His last breath is soft. His last gaze is into your eyes. He doesn't blink. He never looked away. Not even then. You bury him under the oak tree, with his blanket, his peanut butter jar, and your dog tags. You mark it with a stone etched by your own hand. Scout, more than a hero. Then you sit beside it until the sun goes down. And finally, you cry. Your house feels empty without the soft thud of paws against hardwood. You keep waking up at 3 a.m., expecting the jingle of tags, the grunt of a dog settling beside your bed. But the silence is total now, complete, like a jungle ambush of stillness. Unnatural, dangerous in its own way. So you get to work. You write, not about your own wounds, not directly, but about the war dogs, their training, their missions, their loyalty, their fate. You send your story to a few veterans magazines. Most don't reply. One finally does. Prints your article under the title, Scout's Honor. It goes modestly viral, for 1980 standards, anyway. And suddenly, letters start arriving. Dozens, then hundreds, from former handlers, from Gold Star families, from civilians who never knew. A woman from Pennsylvania writes, "My brother served in '71 with a dog named Bronco. He came home. The dog didn't. He never stopped blaming himself." A man from Alabama sends you a grainy photo. "This is Rex, my partner, left in Danong. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." And a high school student writes, "I read about Scout for a history project. Why didn't they all come home?" Why indeed? Mainstream fact. Of the approximately 4,000 dogs deployed during the Vietnam War, fewer than 200 were officially returned to the United States. The remaining were either euthanized, turned over to the South Vietnamese Army, or abandoned as surplus equipment. That term alone, surplus equipment, catches in your throat. Because you remember Scout's eyes. You remember the way he stopped at the jungle's edge when you were too scared to move. You remember how he bled beside you. No equipment ever did that. Fringe tidbit. Some say a few dogs weren't left behind at all, but hidden, smuggled out. A rogue network of soldiers, handlers, and local sympathizers who forged documents, swapped collars, and flew dogs home under false IDs. There's one story about a shepherd named Joker, flown to Hawaii in a crate labeled radio repair parts. No confirmation, but you hope it's true. You need it to be, because justice, even whispered, matters. So you keep telling the story. In schools, in libraries, in dim halls filled with folding chairs and tired faces. You never charge. You just speak, and people listen. They cry. They laugh. They ask where Scout is now. And you always answer, "Still with me." Which is true, because he is. In every step, in every syllable. Historians still argue whether the U.S. military's treatment of its Vietnam War dogs was an administrative oversight or a willful dismissal of animal lives in the pursuit of bureaucratic ease. But the effect was real. The heartbreak was widespread, and the silence that followed was suffocating. For decades, there were no memorials, no government apologies, just memories and guilt. You start hearing from handlers who never got closure. Men in their 60s and 70s who wake up sweating from dreams of barking. One man tells you he still keeps his dog's leash in his truck, just in case. Another says he walks with an invisible dog beside him, out of habit, down to the corner store. These men don't want medals. They don't even want pity. They want to know that someone remembers. Someone knows. Eventually, a movement grows. Slow, stubborn, but relentless. You're invited to testify at a congressional hearing. It's 1999. Your knees ache. Your hands tremble. But you speak clearly. You hold up a photo of Scout. You read from a letter sent by a child who learned about him in school. And when you finish, the room is quiet. Not out of disinterest, but respect. You've done your job. And then it happens. In 2000, President Clinton signs the Robbie Law. It allows military working dogs to be formally adopted by their handlers after service. No more euthanizing heroes. No more declaring living beings excess property. It's not everything, but it's a start. You attend the ceremony. You don't say much. You just bring Scout's collar, hold it in your lap, and whisper, "We did it." Mainstream moment. In 2013, the Canine Members of the Armed Forces Act is passed. It ensures that military dogs receive proper recognition and retirement care. The act elevates them from tools of war to valued veterans. Fringe detail. A few handlers begin carrying honor coins with their dog's name etched beside their own. Like military challenge coins, but heavier, more personal. You design your own. Scout's name, his paw print, and a phrase, "Always forward." You carry it everywhere. The stories don't stop. You're interviewed by NPR. A documentary crew visits your home. One producer wants to option your story for a film. You say sure, but only if the dog gets top billing. They laugh. You don't. Sometimes kids still write. They send drawings of dogs in camouflage, crayon tributes with titles like Fangs of Freedom or Paws and Patriots. You hang them all on your wall. Scout would have loved the attention. He always did enjoy an audience, especially if snacks were involved. At night, you sit under the oak tree, the one where Scout rests. You talk to him about the day, about the dumb things politicians said, about the funny thing the mailman did. And once a year, on the anniversary of his passing, you read him a new letter. Always the same final line. You're not forgotten. You never were. You never will be. Then you fold it, place it in a metal box, bury it beside him, and go inside. Historians still debate whether war dogs changed the tide in Vietnam. Strategically, perhaps not. But to the men they saved, to the lives they touched, they were the tide. They were courage on four legs. Sentinels of silence. Comrades in fur. And Scout? He wasn't perfect. He barked at mailmen. He chewed your boots. He snored louder than thunder. But he never flinched when it mattered. Never hesitated. Never let go. He held the line when you couldn't. He brought you back. More than once. And for that, you owe him everything. The medal they gave you was small, a bit chipped, probably mass-produced. They called it the War Dog Memorial Coin. Bronze, with an etching of Shepherd's head on one side and the phrase "faithful to the end" on the back. You didn't cry when they handed it to you. Not then. Not in public. But later that night, after the crowd left, and the camera lights shut off, and the reporters packed up their sound bites and left for their deadlines, you opened your palm, looked at that little coin in the quiet, and felt something shift. A recognition long overdue. You think of Scout again, naturally. You always do when it gets too quiet. That first night back in the world. Your boots off, bed too soft, refrigerator humming like an airfield. You reached under the bed for your rifle that wasn't there. What was there, though, was a bundle of fur memory. Gone now, but still curled beside your ribcage, like a heartbeat. Mainstream fact. It wasn't until the late 1990s and early 2000s that war dog units from Vietnam began receiving formal recognition from the U.S. government, despite mounting pressure from veteran groups and animal rights advocates. The inertia wasn't malice. It was bureaucracy. But that distinction doesn't comfort you, because bureaucracy doesn't bleed in the field. Dogs do. The first permanent memorial to war dogs went up in 2001, dedicated in Langley, Texas. It features a bronze handler kneeling beside his canine partner, a leash dangling between them, heads turned toward a horizon of ghost battlegrounds. You visited it once, didn't take any pictures, didn't post online, just stood there for a long while, letting the Texas sun beat down on your shoulders, listening to the names etched in metal. Some names were dogs, some were men, You couldn't always tell which was which. That felt appropriate. Fringe tidbit. At that Texas dedication, a small group of Vietnamese Americans showed up, holding photos of their own dogs. Dogs that had been gifted to the Army of the Republic of Vietnam after the U.S. pulled out. They had names like Chew, Cop, and Soy. Some of them survived. Some were eaten. It's a story no one talks about. You heard it in a whisper behind the monument. A woman speaking Vietnamese through clenched teeth while a teenager translated for her, barely able to meet your eyes. Later that week, you open a package mailed from California. No return address. Inside, a photograph of a war dog named Fong, standing in front of a wire fence in Pleiku, 1969. Taped to the back was a note. He didn't come home, but I never stopped waiting. Thank you for keeping them alive. It was unsigned. You keep it framed. Sometimes you whisper Fong before bed, just in case he's listening. Historians still argue whether it was the emotional weight of handlers' testimonies or the pressure from animal welfare groups that finally turned the tide of public opinion on war dogs. But you think it was something else. A collective guilt, maybe a national itch in the back of the throat that needed to be coughed out after decades of silence. Because deep down, we all understand one thing. You don't leave your dog behind. At reunions now, the old handlers sit in semicircles, legs twitching with old injuries, voices rough from years of cigarettes and shouting. But their eyes light up like Christmas when they talk dogs. One of them, Larry from Kentucky, brings a box of old collars to every meetup. He says they belong to ghost dogs. Unclaimed. Forgotten. He lets the new generation of handlers take one home. It's not morbid. It's holy. A 13-year-old boy in San Diego once stood in front of the traveling war dog wall and asked his father, did any of them ever run away? And his father, who had handled a dog named Max during Operation Tailwind, bent down, patted his son on the shoulder, and said, never from us, only from the war. There are rumors now that handlers are pushing for a war dog to receive the Medal of Honor. So far, the Defense Department has hesitated. The official word is, it's a human award. But so were the bullets they dodged. So were the mines they sniffed. So were the wounds they licked, the enemies they held off, the lives they saved. You think, if war can dehumanize men, surely it can elevate animals. Even just once. Mainstream shift. In 2016, the Smithsonian launched an exhibit called The Dogs of War, featuring detailed displays of working dogs throughout U.S. military history. Scout wasn't in it, but his breed was. His purpose was. His shadow loomed behind every plaque. You saw kids stand and stare at the mannequins of handlers in jungle fatigues. You heard one whisper, cool. Another said, wait, they didn't come back. And a parent, stunned, said, I didn't know either. That was enough. That was everything. Back home, you keep writing. The letters never stopped. The memories never fade. Sometimes you wake up and hear nails clicking on the tile. There's nothing there, just your own heart, pacing. But sometimes you swear you see a shape in the hallway. One that turns when you call. One that disappears when the light turns on. You don't chase it. You just smile. Say, you're home. You've started fostering retired military dogs now. Some are broken. Some are bitey. Some just need a patch of grass and a bowl of water and a hand that smells like safety. You name them after war dogs you've known, real and otherwise. Buster, Rex, Joker, Chew, Bronco, Max Scout, always Scout. You keep a shoebox full of items that would mean nothing to a stranger. A mangled leash, a tattered rank patch, a chewed corner of your jungle map, dog tags, literal and military. You plan to have it buried with you, or maybe donated to a war dog museum. Depends on the mood you're in. You haven't decided. Scout would probably just bury it again in the yard. He always did love hide and seek. Historians may never agree on the numbers, on whether it was 4,000 dogs or 4,074, whether 204 came home or only 180. But numbers don't howl at dusk. They don't sit with you during the bad dreams. They don't tilt their heads when you talk about something you can't quite explain. Only dogs do that. Only your dog did that. Once a young girl asked you if Scout ever got scared in the war. You told her the truth. Every time. Then you added, but he still moved forward. She smiled like it made sense. That's the lesson, you think. Not that he was fearless, but that he was loyal despite the fear. Isn't that what we all want to be? Isn't that what we all hope someone sees in us? Scout's grave is marked with a flat stone, hand-etched, that simply reads, "Loyal, brave, returned in spirit." It's enough. It's everything. You touch it sometimes and wonder who you'd be without him. Then you remember, you are who you are because of him. Because of those nights, those trails, that howl, that heart. You're standing in your backyard, years later. It's dusk, the kind of golden hush that makes even the loudest memories speak in whispers. Your hand is on the fence post, calloused fingers brushing the rough grain of wood worn smooth from years of leaning. Beneath your boots, the grass is short, part habit, part ritual, the same way you use to check the perimeter of your old jungle camps. You whistle, out of habit, the same low two-note call you used in Vietnam. Nothing answers, but you still wait a beat, just in case. Just in case he's there, in the folds of silence. Mainstream fact, by 2000, U.S. legislation finally allowed for military working dogs to be adopted by their handlers after service, reversing the decades-long policy of euthanasia or foreign transfer. The Robbie's Law, named after a retired military dog who was denied a peaceful retirement, opened the door for these veterans. Yes, veterans, to come home. But for the Vietnam generation, that came too late. Robbie was post 9/11. You were post-Tet. Different wars, different rules, same heartbreak. You've always hated the word euthanize when it came to Scout. Too clinical, too sanitary. As if what really happened wasn't some young specialist, clipboard in hand, nodding toward the kennel while Scout wagged his tail, ready to work again. As if there wasn't a human on the other end of the syringe, swallowing their shame and trying not to cry. As if the dog didn't feel it, because they always feel it. They know when we're lying. They know when we're leaving. They know when we're not coming back. Quirky tidbit. During the Vietnam War, some handlers secretly try to fake injuries or forge paperwork to bring their dogs home. One guy, Danny, you think his name was, snuck his shepherd onto a cargo flight inside a repurposed body bag marked remains. Do not open. Got caught halfway through Guam. Didn't make it. But you remember the way his voice cracked when he told you the story. How he laughed and cried in the same breath. How he said, "I just couldn't leave him. He saved my life more than once." Seemed fair to return the favor. Historians still argue whether the military's choice to euthanize the majority of its war dogs was a logistical necessity or a moral failing of its era. You stopped arguing. It's not an academic exercise when the ghost still sits by your bed. When you still check the porch before sleep, listening for phantom nails clicking on concrete. You've joined forums now, online communities of Vietnam-era handlers, a strange kind of brotherhood. Most of you never met in person, but you know each other deeply. You know how long it takes for the dreams to come back. You know which smells trigger the shakes. You know the kinds of questions civilians ask that make you clench your jaw and smile politely, even though what you want to say is, "He wasn't just a dog." You say, "He was my partner." Sometimes you add, "He was the better soldier." They think you're joking. You're not. There's an old duffel bag in your attic, stitched with mildew and decades of memory. Inside it, a rusted carabiner, a crumbling jungle map, 2 faded photographs, and a laminated checklist of dog commands in Vietnamese, French, and English. You kept it all, not because you're sentimental, but because every time you open it, Scout comes back for a minute, and that minute is sacred. You've started telling Scout's story at schools. Middle schoolers, mostly. Some are attentive. Some are just waiting for lunch. But always, at least one child lingers afterward. Always. One boy brought you his drawing of Scout. "I drew him as a superhero," he said. You smiled, told him he already was. Another girl asked, "Did your dog ever get scared?" You said all the time, then added, "But he never left my side." Mainstream reality. Today's military working dogs are given full honors when they pass. Flag-draped stretchers, taps, folded memorial flags handed to handlers like a sacred exchange. Some dogs even have funerals attended by entire units. You attended one last year. You stood back, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching as a team of Marines saluted a Belgian Malinois who had saved 3 lives in Afghanistan. You whispered Scout's name once, then twice, then again. You don't know why, but it felt right. You've begun recording your memories, not on paper, but with your voice. A friend convinced you to use a podcast app, Oral History. They said, you just speak, and the mic captures everything. They'll edit it later. The first night, you couldn't get past the first sentence. You said Scout was, then stopped. You let the silence stretch. The red recording light blinked, steady as a heartbeat. Eventually, you said, he is. Then you told a story, all of it. Fringe detail. Some handlers in Vietnam trained their dogs with food rewards made from Spam, rice, and coffee-soaked biscuits. You try to recreate the recipe once in your kitchen. Scout wouldn't have eaten it now. Not after learning what steak tastes like. But back then, he'd have wolfed it down and wagged his tail like he'd just uncovered buried treasure. You still have the bowl, still etched with his name. The stainless steel dulled, but unbreakable. Just like him. There's a photo album you keep on the shelf by the window. One page is empty. You leave it that way on purpose, in case someone ever finds a picture of Scout you don't have. Or maybe because some parts of you never wanted to finish the story. Maybe the blank page is where he lives now. Out of frame, tail wagging, waiting for the next mission. Or the next dream. You once told someone, the thing about dogs is they're not built to survive war. Then you added, neither are we. You think about that sometimes. About how the war broke something in both of you. And how somehow, that broken part learned to love more fiercely, guard more loyally, and forgive more quickly. Historians may put dates on wars. Politicians may sign peace treaties. But the dogs never cared about politics. They didn't know what Vietnam meant. They only knew the shape of your voice, the weight of your hand, the sound of your fear, and the thrill of your relief. They only knew you, and they stayed. That's all that mattered. That's all that ever will. You once dreamed of Scout running through tall grass, his harness off. No leash, no war. Just sunlight and wind. He paused at a ridge, looked back once, then kept going. You woke up smiling and crying. The next morning, you found a muddy paw print on your porch. It rained that night, sure. You told yourself it was just the neighbor's dog. But part of you wondered, just for a moment, because sometimes love leaves tracks, even long after it's gone. You wake up early now, not because you need to. Retirement has loosened the grip of alarm clocks and early shifts, but because there's a certain kind of silence only found at dawn. A gentle, eggshell hush, like the world hasn't fully decided what it wants to be yet. And in that silence, you listen to birdsong, to your own breath, sometimes to memories that drift in, like radio static from a long-abandoned frequency. And always, just beneath the noise, the whisper of paws on jungle ground. Today, you're driving. A long, slow route through the back roads, where the oaks lean heavy over cracked pavement, and the wind smells like earth and cut grass. In the passenger seat, a framed photo, Scout, in full harness, his head tilted, mouth open in that lopsided grin dogs do when they're proud of something they've just done right. You're taking him with you, because you're going to the wall. Mainstream fact. There is no official memorial to the 4,000 military dogs who served in Vietnam. Not in D.C., not in the National Mall, but in Homedale, New Jersey, a bronze shepherd stand alert beside a soldier kneeling to rest. Ears perked, tail still, eyes fixed forward. It's called the War Dog Memorial. You've seen pictures for years, but never visited. Until today. You park quietly, leaving the radio off. The heat rises from the asphalt in wavy mirages. The wind plays with the corners of the old paper map in your lap. Your legs are slower now, knees stiff from the years, but the moment your boots hit the gravel trail, something shifts. You are not 70. You are 19. You're in uniform, and Scout is beside you, panting softly, alert. Quirky tidbit. At some unofficial gatherings, handlers leave milk bones at the foot of war dog statues. Not for tourists, not for photos, just as a quiet promise. We didn't forget. You brought one today, not because Scout liked them, He was more a jerky guy, but because it's a symbol now, a ritual, an oath whispered across generations. You place it at the statue's paw, and for a moment, it feels like a reunion. Historians still argue whether military working dogs should be posthumously awarded medals for valor. Some say dogs can't comprehend honor. Others argue that the point of a medal isn't the recipient. It's the nation saying thank you. But you don't need a medal to know. Scout was brave. More than most men you met in country. More than you, some days. And what he did, it saved lives. And one of them was yours. You kneel beside the statue and trace the nameplate with your finger. Bronze is cold in the morning, but it warms quickly under skin. You wonder how many others have touched this same spot. Then you stand and walk to a quiet bench beneath a dogwood tree. Its blossoms pale and trembling like memory itself. You sit, the framed photo resting in your lap. And then you speak. Not loudly. Not for anyone else. Just for him. Do you remember that one night at LZ Nancy? You ask. And in your mind, Scout looks up, ears twitching. We were exhausted. You found the mine I missed. Remember? You just froze. You chuckle, voice soft. You saved me. Again. And then you're quiet. Because there's nothing else to say that wouldn't break the air in half. The thing about grief, no one tells you, is that it doesn't shrink with time. It just fits differently. At first, it's a boulder crushing your chest. Then a heavy rucksack. Then a pocket stone, smoothed by years, always carried. Sometimes forgotten, but never gone. You remember what a chaplain once told you. On one of those long nights when everything smelled like damp sandbags and burnt coffee. He said dogs have souls. You can't look into those eyes and tell me otherwise. You didn't believe him then. You do now, because something watched over you out there. And maybe, just maybe it's still watching. Fringe theory. Some Buddhist monks believe that loyal dogs are reincarnated as guardians, spiritual sentinels who remain tethered to their people until both have crossed into peace. You're not sure you believe in reincarnation, but you felt Scout's presence in strange places. In the wind along the Mekong, in a thunderclap during your daughter's birth, in the silent comfort of your darkest nights. Maybe that's what loyalty looks like when it transcends time. Maybe that's what love becomes when it refuses to fade. You lean back on the bench. Overhead, a plane passes. The kind you used to ride in, C-130, maybe, or maybe just a regular flight, carrying someone else's story. You squint up at it and whisper, I hope you made it home in the end. Not to Scout, to the others. The ones who didn't get statues, or photo frames, or milk bones. The 3,800 who stayed. The ones who waited by empty foxholes. The ones who licked the boots of men who would leave and never return. The ones who looked skyward as the helicopters lifted off, tails wagging, tongues out, still faithful. You carry that home with you. All of it. Back at the house, you take the photo off your dash and place it on the windowsill, right where the sun hits in the morning. Beside it, a single boot lace. Frayed, torn, mud-stained. You once tied it around Scout's collar after he saved a squad from an ambush. It's all that's left of that day, but it's enough. Mainstream fact. In 2014, the U.S. military officially recognized war dogs as veterans, entitling them to adoption support, retirement care, and transportation assistance. It's a shift not just in policy, but in identity. They are no longer equipment. They are soldiers. They are comrades. You watch the sunlight inch across the windowsill until it warms the edge of Scout's photo. He's still grinning. And in that grin, you find something close to peace. Something close to sleep. You settle in your chair, hand draped over the armrest, eyes fluttering. And somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeat and breath, you hear it. A pant, a paw step, a low, familiar growl, just a warning. You smile. Good boy. You whisper, and finally, you rest. The dog tags jingle faintly. You keep them in a cigar box, tucked into the drawer of your nightstand. Not your tags. Those are mounted on a shadow box above the TV. But his, Scout's, a crude, stamped aluminum tag with only 4 characters. S-143. He wasn't property. Not really. But that's what the military said he was. classified as equipment. They wrote in cold, unfeeling memos. Same category as a canteen or a claymore. Something to be shipped, used, and, when inconvenient, left behind. And for decades, that label sat like a splinter in the memory of every man who'd ever watched his partner climb into a crate, or worse, vanish into the jungle mist. No medevac, no airlift, no recognition. Just silence. But memory? Memory never obeys paperwork. So tonight, you open the box again. And listen. Let's wind the tape back a little. In the late 1990s, something strange began happening. A few grizzled veterans, now older than their drill sergeants ever were, began to gather. Not at VFW halls, not at gun shows, but at dog parks, at shelters, in online forums, even on those slow, pixelated message boards with backgrounds that looked like denim and loading bars that groaned like tank treads. They had stories about dogs, and those stories wouldn't sit still. Mainstream fact: in 2000, Congress passed Robbie's Law, named after Heroic K. 9 denied adoption and later euthanized. The law allowed military dogs to be adopted after their service, a radical reversal after decades of being labeled expendable. Before that, most dogs who served overseas, especially in Vietnam, were either euthanized or transferred to South Vietnamese forces, where their fates vanished in bureaucratic fog. Robbie's Law changed that, but for many, it came too late. You remember the first time you heard the term canine PTSD. It sounded ridiculous, like a punchline. What's next? Therapy squirrels? Emotional support lizards? But then you saw it, in a documentary clip. A Labrador pacing endlessly in a kennel, ears down, body stiff. Not reacting to treats, not reacting to praise, reacting only to sounds, chopper blades, firecrackers, sirens. His handler, 6'3", tough as rebar, could barely speak through tears. "This dog saved my life," he whispered, "and I couldn't save his." Fringe tidbit. In the early 2000s, several shelters began quietly reaching out to military bases. They weren't just looking to house war dogs. They were trying to rehabilitate them. One shelter in Texas started canine yoga sessions, where traumatized dogs sat beside veterans with PTSD during guided meditation. You'd laugh if it didn't make so much sense. Two creatures who'd both seen too much, sitting quietly, breathing again, together. Historians still argue whether the mass euthanization of Vietnam war dogs was a logistical necessity or a shameful moral failure. Officially, the line goes, there was no budget, no transport, no capacity, but handlers tell another story. They remember watching their dogs walk away, guided by strangers, sometimes in crates, sometimes on chains, sometimes not at all. One man told of sneaking into a depot with bolt cutters, trying to free his dog before dawn. He was caught, court-martialed, said he didn't regret it, said he'd do it again. You remember something like that, too. Not a court-martial, but a choice. A young sergeant, barely out of high school, stood by a wire fence at Da Nang, arguing with a major. His dog, Rex, was inside the pen, whining, confused. The major barked protocol. The sergeant just stared, and then he opened the gate. Didn't ask, didn't explain, just walked off base with Rex like it was a Sunday afternoon stroll. They both vanished down the road. No one ever found them. But word spread, whispered like gospel. He tried. He didn't leave him. That story stayed with you. Long after the war. Long after the medals and funerals and divorce and back surgeries and long, awkward reunions where people didn't quite meet your eyes. It stayed. Because every man who served with a war dog remembers the final moment. That look. The one the dog gives you when the leash is taken. Not fear. Not confusion. Just a quiet question. Where are you going? Why can't I come? And you live with that. Forever. Today there are statues. In South Carolina, New Jersey, California, even at Lackland Air Force Base, the birthplace of American war dogs. Some are dramatic. Life-size shepherds posed mid-leap, jaws open, muscles taut. Some are simple. A bronze paw print pressed into stone beside a soldier's name. You visited a few. You always bring something small. Not flowers. A chew toy. A collar. A folded note. One time, a worn patch from your jungle fatigues. You don't cry at these visits. But you don't speak much afterward either. There's an odd comfort in knowing you're not alone. You've met others. Men who still twitch at rustling grass. Who check door frames twice. Who sleep lighter than they'd like. They all have stories. Different jungles. Different dogs. Same pain. Same pride. Mainstream fact. Today, military working dogs are trained in scent detection, bomb disposal, patrol, and emotional support. They're deployed globally with detailed retirement plans, adoption networks, and even custom vet programs. Some have titanium teeth. Some have metals. All have handlers who swear by them. You saw one, not long ago, at an airport. A soldier walking with a jet-black Belgian Malinois. The dog had a vest, patches, even boots. The soldier was young, really young. You stopped him. Good dog, you asked. He grinned. The best. You smiled back, but your voice caught in your throat. You wanted to say so much more. About Scout, about war, about memory. But in the end, all you said was, take care of each other. He nodded and walked on. That's the hardest part, maybe. The walking on. The fact that you still do. Even after all this. Even after Scout. Even after everything. You keep walking. Because if you stop, the memories win. And Scout wouldn't want that. You take out his tags one last time. They still smell faintly of something metallic and sweet. Old blood and rust and fur. You hold them in your palm and whisper, "Thanks for staying with me." Even now, you slip them back into the box, close the drawer, and for the first time in a long time, you exhale without shuddering. Scout may not have made it home in body, but he never really left. Not where it counted. You lie back now, the weight of history pressing gently against your chest, not like a burden, but like a presence, a companion curled by your feet, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, but never truly leaves your side. Because some stories don't end with a gunshot or a folded flag. Some just trail off, like footprints disappearing in a tall grass, or a leash left hanging on a nail by the door. And this is one of those stories. Let's take one final walk. The year is 2012. The Pentagon has just declassified thousands of Vietnam War photos and reports. Among them, candid snapshots of dogs, leaping through jungle underbrush, napping under hammocks, swimming across flooded rice paddies with their ears slicked back. But one photo stands out. It's grainy, black and white, a little off-center, taken just before dusk. It shows a Marine sitting on an ammo crate, writing a letter home. Beside him, asleep with his head on the soldier's boot, is a floppy-eared mutt. Not regulation, not trained, just there. The caption reads, "We don't know his name, but he stayed." It's fitting, isn't it, that this war, so tangled in controversy, loss, and confusion, found its clearest sense of loyalty in creatures who never knew why they were there in the first place. Dogs didn't protest, didn't desert, didn't question strategy or worry about geopolitics. They just showed up, day after day, mile after mile, trap after trap. Mainstream fact, by the time the U.S. pulled out of Vietnam in 1975, approximately 4,000 military working dogs had served. Fewer than 200 were officially returned to American soil. The rest were either euthanized or handed off to South Vietnamese forces, many without formal training to handle them. That statistic isn't just chilling. It's enduring. It's become a rallying cry for dog lovers, veterans, animal rights advocates, and historians alike. Because numbers don't forget. They haunt. Fringe tidbit. There's a persistent rumor, never confirmed, never fully denied, that in the waning days of the war, some handlers try to smuggle their dogs out in laundry bags, tool crates, even wrapped in parachutes. One tale says a dog named Duke was loaded onto a C-130 by a pilot who simply winked and said, "No one counts souls on this plane." Whether it happened, who knows? But hope has always needed legends, especially for those we left behind. Historians still argue whether the U.S. military could have realistically repatriated all war dogs from Vietnam. Some cite health risks, quarantine procedures, logistics nightmares. Others point to pure institutional apathy. The dogs weren't viewed as soldiers. They weren't even viewed as lives. Just assets, inventory, expendables. But handlers will tell you differently. To them, each dog was a partner, a shield, a soul tethered to theirs by more than just a leash. Today, memorials stand in dozens of states. The most famous? The Vietnam War Dog Memorial at Marchfield Air Museum in Riverside, California. It shows a soldier kneeling beside his dog, one hand on the animal's back. Both stare forward, both ready, neither alone. When a sculpture was unveiled, veterans wept openly, not just for their dogs, but for the part of themselves those dogs carried through the darkest days. The part that never made it back. You think of Scout again, his ears twitching at jungle rustles, his body tense as a tripwire under moonlight, his nose pressing against your palm during those unbearable moments of waiting. Before patrol, before ambush, before everything. It was never just about obedience. It was presence, the kind that tells you, even if this goes badly, you won't go through it alone. There's power in that. A quiet, sleeping power. Mainstream fact. Since 2000, the military has improved protocols for war dog retirement. Handlers now often have first right of adoption. Specialized veterinary programs help ease dogs into civilian life. And the public's love for these animals has only grown. Today, many retired war dogs are honored with funerals, complete with flags, bugles, and final salutes. Some handlers keep their ashes in urns shaped like bones, because sometimes grief needs humor, just to stay breathable. You smile faintly now, because even though this story is soaked in tragedy, loss, oversight, bureaucratic failure, there's a strange, undeniable thread of beauty winding through it. The beauty of companionship without condition, of heroism with no headlines, of the quiet footfall beside you in the dark. And that's really what the war dogs gave us. Not just victories, not just protection, but moments. A stillness in the storm, a soft pant in the silence, a reason to keep walking. You reach for the lamp now, eyes heavy. Outside, the world still spins. Louder, faster, more confusing than ever. But somewhere deep in the marrow of your bones, you still feel Scout, waiting by the door. Alert, loyal, ready. You nod once, turn out the light, and let yourself rest.